This K-drama started with a girl named Ri Hong-dan who comes from North Korea. But although from North Korea, she said that she was a BTS army. Since she was a kid, she always secretly watched K-drama and listened to K-pop. But her difference is the fact that she joined the real army, which is the North Korean army. But suddenly something unexpected happened. The government decided to end the war against South Korea and even made joint economic zone formation as well as use the same currency. Long story short, in 2025 she went to Seoul for her Korean dream. In this drama, 2025 is when North Koreans can go to South Korea. Even, the joint security area has changed to the joint economic area. Big companies of South Korea are interested in doing big investments in North Korea. Unfortunately, the house and job that an immigration broker promised her was fake. It turned out she works as a waitress and ladies' companion in Seoul. She also called the loan shark because she needed more money. Then, she paid the loan shark some money and the loan shark gave her drugs, but she refused to receive it. Suddenly, a girl and the loan shark's men entered the room. It seems they tortured her because she wanted to run away without paying. Afterwards, Ri Hong-dan told the loan shark that they were thief bastards. Hearing that, he slapped Ri Hong-dan and tried to sexually abuse her. Luckily, after a while finally she could fight him and pointed a gun at him. The loan shark quickly threw a thermos at her and pushed her to a window until the window broke. But since the gun was still in her hand, she directly killed him. Afterwards, she killed one of the loan shark's men too to save the other girl, and then she asked her to steal their money. 1 year later, Ri Hong-dan became a fugitive. The police officers were still looking for her. She heard the news about it on the television on the street when she was being chased by the police officers. Her bloody hand touched a thing near the television. Then a guy came and touched her blood, but Ri Hong-dan was not there anymore. Then, Ri Hong-dan was confused because she had no clue where to go. Feeling desperate, she took her gun in her pocket and was about to kill herself. But the guy earlier came and he asked about her condition. He also noticed that Ri Hong-dan was a fugitive. But, he thought that she was the thief who only targeted the evil ones. Knowing that he noticed her, Ri Hong-dan directly pointed the gun at him and asked who he was. Eventually, the guy wanted to ask her to join a big plan. He explained to her about the big plan, which is a large-scale theft with a total of 4 trillion won. Finally, Ri Hong-dan joined him. He told her that he was a professor, and she also met with other members who joined this big plan. Then the professor asked them to change their name and talk in an informal way for security. It was already confirmed that the new name would be a city name around the world and they would rotate the globe for the new name. Ri Hong-dan got Tokyo as her new name. The others' new names are Rio, Denver, Moscow, Oslo, Helsinki, Nairobi, and Berlin. After that, the professor told them to do this plan, then disappeared without anyone getting hurt or dead. He also told them the place to do it is the Mint Korea Unified, MKU. 5 months later, Nairobi and Tokyo spied on a group of school students who went to the MKU and reported it to Berlin. Meanwhile, the other guys prepared to do their planned action and wore the money heist mask. They targeted the MKU's truck and they made roadblocks as well as smoke. Afterwards, they attacked the MKU cops and made the cops helpless. They forced the cops to do anything they wanted if the cops didn't want to be dead. They turned out to ask the cops to change clothes so that they could wear the cops' uniform. Then when Berlin wanted to enter MKU by the cop's car, he was asked for a staff's card by a security guard because he just saw him. Luckily, Rio made it quickly by hacking MKU's website. Meanwhile, Nairobi and Tokyo tried to enter MKU as guests. When Nairobi did a security check, she was asked to take off her jacket. Seeing that, Tokyo pointed a gun at a staff there and quickly another staff forbade her. But, she fought him. At the same time, the guys just arrived with the truck. Soon, they attacked people around there. In different place, Nairobi and Tokyo attacked too. Then they quickly attacked people inside the MKU building and seemed to gather people in one place. Afterwards, Tokyo realized that a student missed. She was looking for her and finally found her, who was asking for her mother's help at the toilet. After that, all MKU's guests along with all the staffs were blindfolded. Berlin told them that they were the hostages and threatened them not to mess around. Not so long after that, a phone was ringing, and the MKU director named Cho Young-min asked a permission to Berlin to pick up the phone, since it must be from the head office. Berlin ended up asking a girl next to the director who had an affair with the director named Yoon Misun, who picked it up. She did it nervously, but finally she did it without any problem. In different place, Rio, Denver, and Moscow were trying to break the digital security safe. Not so long after that, finally Moscow did it, and they were really happy. Denver even quickly lied on the money, which was also followed by Rio. Then Berlin reported it to the professor and told him that they would get out soon. When they were about to get out, the security alarm was ringing. The director took a peek to find out what they were doing, but they caught him. Berlin, who is really good at making people nervous, then threatened him and made the other prisoners really scared. But actually the professor asked them not to kill anyone, even, the professor forbade them not to kill in urgent situations too. Not so long after that, the police officers came. They were already ready with their money heist masks and the guns. Then they quickly shot around the police officers like near the police car, but the police officers counterattacked them by trying to kill them. Soon they hid in a safer place, but Rio, who is really bad at shooting, seemed really nervous and just did nothing until the police officer shot his shoulder. Quickly they shot the police car, but Tokyo reminded that they couldn't kill the police. Nairobi said she had no choice or else they would be killed. Seeing that, Tokyo threw smoke bombs at the police and asked the rest to go to the MKU building quickly. They also took Rio to the building. At the building, Tokyo made sure of Rio's condition. Luckily, he just fainted and was not dead. This robbery news quickly spread. It made the South Korean officials contact the North Korean officials. As a result, the head police of the Joint Economic Area named Yoon Chon-soo got a new position as head of Joint South and North Korean police. The official also said that if the cooperation between North and South Korea was ruined, the world would laugh at them. After that in South Korea, there was a daughter that tried to wake his mother up because it was already morning. Then they had breakfast and the police head called her and told her about the robbery and meant Korean unified. Back at the MKU building, they asked all prisoners to wear the money heist's uniform as theirs. Then Rio and Oslo tried to do their abilities so that they could contact the professor, and finally they made it to report the condition to him. Meanwhile, the woman who had the breakfast with her daughter earlier is actually a negotiation team leader of the South Korean police force named Seon Woo-jin. She asked about this incident in detail, and the South Korean police thought that the thefts were from North Korea since the bullet is from the north. Afterwards, they met Captain Cha Mo-hyuk from North Korea's State Defense Ministry. The captain told her that the North Korean chose experienced agents to handle this incident, but Seon Woo-jin didn't agree because she preferred to do it smoothly without harming anyone. When the captain said that the agents could handle it in just 5 minutes, she said that the thieves could do anything in 5 minutes, but the captain said in 5 minutes the thieves couldn't even pull the gun's pedal. Furthermore, the captain also told her that the agents even tried to infiltrate the blue building to kill the president. After that, their conversation was not related to the MKU incident and the condition turned more messed up. Yoon Chon-soo tried to make the condition better, then he talked with her privately for a while and he agreed that they should do it safely and peacefully. Finally, the captain followed the deal and he also wanted to know how she works. He also knew that her ex-husband was a politician and people judged that she got her position because of her ex-husband. He even said that she admitted it already. She looked mad but seemed to get used to the judgment, and she said only a coward who judges her that way. Then, she called the professor for the negotiation. The professor mocked her by saying that he only wanted to talk with the leaders. He also said that the police ruined his plan, he only wanted the money and was about to run away by helicopter. She tried to negotiate so that the professor could release the students and she promised to lend him a helicopter. She also said that it would be difficult to handle many hostages. Then the professor said that he would think about it and he told her that his team just consists of 4 people. 11 hours after the robbery, Seon Woo-jin saw many police officers who were about to attack the MKU building. Then she met Yoon Chon-soo and he explained because the thieves were only 4 people. But she told him what if he lied, but the captain said if he wanted to lie, he should have doubled the total. But she thought maybe it was part of the professor's plan. Afterwards, Yoon Chon-soo told her that he should do this because the 2 countries wanted it to be finished soon. He even asked her to go home. When she was about to go home, it seemed that she just activated her phone and a guy asked her to go to a cafe by text. Then she went to the cafe. It turned out the guy who chatted her was the professor. She called him Sunho. The professor acted like he knew nothing about the incident. For months ago, the professor already prepared the possibilities that both Korea would ask the experts to handle this incident. The money heist members asked things that could have happened. Rio even said that North Korea always hid the negotiator they would send, but the professor said he already knew who South Korea would send. The negotiator is Seon Woo-jin. They got other negotiators, but the others got issues like sex scandals and bribery cases. Then the professor said he would make her help with his big plan without her realizing it. He tried to get close to her and she even looked so in love with him. And from her text to him earlier, the professor could speculate that when she left the location, it means that North Korea took over it, which means there would be attacks. North Korean police forces were about to do attacks in every direction, even emergency doors and the roof. But the professor has anticipated it too. Then the North Korean police forces started to spy on them, but the police forces along with the 2 Korean police officers were shocked because many people were wearing the money heist uniform and pointing a gun. Not so long after that, Cho Young-min and a student named Kim did a live at MKU's building. They were informed that both the thieves and the prisoners were the same uniform and they were asked to use fake guns. They also said not to do any harm and just do the negotiation. After that, Yoon Chan-soo got a call that informed him that the student is a US ambassador's daughter. Quickly, Captain Cha Mo-hyuk told his men to step back. Meanwhile at the cafe, Seon Woo-jin was called again. The professor didn't need to hear it to know that the attack failed and they chose to do the negotiation. After she was heading back to the location, the professor quickly contacted Berlin to know their condition. He also informed him that the negotiator was just back to the location. Then they did their next plan. They wouldn't steal that 4 trillion money, but print the new money which was 4 trillion won, which no one owned and couldn't be traced. Suddenly, turning back to 25 years ago, there was a mother and her son who were about to go to the Yalu River. The river is usually used by the turncoats to go to South Korea or the third country to go to another free country, if they are lucky. But unluckily, the mother was caught by the officer and they shot her. Afterwards, the son was tortured by other children. But finally he fought one of the children and counterattacked him. Soon he was taken to jail. That little child is Berlin. 25 years later, things were chaotic and the prisoners attacked the prison officer. Other prisoners seemed to obey Berlin's order. Back at MKU building, 15 hours after the robbery, they divided the prisoners and gave them the job. Then a staff told Cho Young-min that they were printing money and he was told to dig a tunnel in the cellar. The director then told him to make a reason to change the group. In the upstairs, Berlin watched them and he thought that the professor's order to assure the prisoner that they would be safe was too naive. Meanwhile, Seon Woo-jin got back home and her mother asked about her relationship with the professor. Her mother also liked him and thought that he was a good guy. She said before she died, she wanted to see her daughter with a good guy. After that, she asked about the incident too. Seon Woo-jin explained a little bit, but she had to be back again and said that she couldn't answer calls when she was in charge. In the location, there were many reporters who interviewed Yoon Chan-soo. They even asked whether the North Korea member who made it failed would be changed. Then Seon Woo-jin arrived, and she said the attack was a hoax since the prisoner's security was their priority. After that, from that day Seon Woo-jin led the negotiation. She also said that at least they knew the money heist's strength, who used the hostages and got good guns. She said that one thing for sure was the thieves were not just usual bank robbers. She then called the professor and asked if the hostages were in a good condition and the professor confirmed it. Afterwards, the professor asked her private questions like when was her last sexual intercourse and whether she happened to fake orgasm or not. Then the professor said she lied as she lied about last night's Special Forces ambush. He said that his priority was to get to know each other and build trust. After that, he told her to contact him again when she was ready to tell her last orgasm. Then she thought that the money heists would think of a way to escape, but it would be hard to cross the borders and that made them worry. She also thought that those who rushed would lose and their self-confidence would surely change soon and all the officers had to do was just buy some more time. But actually, the money heist who bought some more time. In the cellar, Cho Young-min seemed to have trouble digging the tunnel. He said because he was a director and was not used to doing the job. It made Denver angry and even wanted to hit him because it seemed that the director thought that kind of job was a joke. Afterwards, Berlin came and asked Denver to smoke together and they talked. Berlin reminded him to control his emotions and if he did his job well, things would be okay. Not so long after that, Moscow came and told Denver to control his emotion too and said that he was similar to his mother. Because of that, they argued. Meanwhile, because Moscow left them too, Cho Young-min influenced his staffs to not do what the money heists wanted and asked them to call the police and then he told them a plan to do it. Suddenly, a staff's hand got hurt on purpose. Moscow and Denver quickly came back. Without realizing, Cho Young-min already left the cellar. While Denzer was taking the first aid box in another room, Cho Young-min secretly sneaked out too. Luckily, Tokyo found him and took him to Berlin. Because of it, they gathered all the hostages and divided the hostages group to South Korean and North Korean. Berlin informed the new rule to the hostages. When a South Korean is disobedient or endangers safety, the North Korean group would be punished and vice versa. It made the prisoners keep an eye on each other. Hearing that, Tokyo was really angry and she argued with Berlin. She asked why he didn't just punish the director instead. But Berlin stood by his decision, which he thought he still followed what the professor told them. On the police officer's side, Captain Cha Mohyuk asked Sean Woo-jin what to do next, and she told him no need to rush. Because no CCTV, radio frequency, and cell phones on the building could be detected, Sean Woo-jin asked an officer to cooperate with the station near the building to get a signal within the perimeter. She also asked all officers to turn off their phones and other devices, as well as evacuate local residents and reporters outside the range of the signal. Back at the MKU building, Cho Young-min told Yoon Misin to get the watch that they could use to call the police. Yoon Misin argued with him because he asked her to do risky thing for him. Then Denver came and asked them. Cho Young-min said that she was pregnant and asked Denver to give her a rest. Then she was permitted to go to a room to take a rest, the same room as in stayed. And stayed there because she was not from South and North Korea. Long story short, Yoon Misin was helped by An so that she could get the watch in the director's room. And asked Rio to accompany her to the toilet because she was in her period. While they were in the toilet, Yoon Misin tried to enter the director's room. She got the watch and tried to call, but Denver suddenly came to the room. She explained to him that she looked for food and Denver believed it. She quickly turned off the smartwatch, but the police officers already noticed it. Then the investigator called the professor to ask whether he confiscated the hostages' phones or not, and he confirmed it. He also re-explained that he treated the hostages well. By that conversation, Sean Woo-jin assumed that they didn't know yet about the watch. Then an officer suggested to just send a link by text, and when the watch was opened, the officers could hack and they could hear all their conversations even by video. At the MKU building, Denver stopped Cho Young-min, who was about to do his job. Denver, who believed Yoon Misin, scolded the director. Yoon Misin pretended to arbitrate them while she put the watch in the director's pocket. Meanwhile, the professor got a feeling that the police officers got something since Sean Woo-jin was so calm on the phone. Then he texted her as her crush and asked her to go to the cafe. When she was in the cafe, she was called by an officer about the watch hacking. The professor went to the back of his cafe and heard her conversation. So the professor hacked the negotiator's phone, but she realized it. She directly gave him the handcuffs, but he explained to her that he did it because he thought she got another guy. After that, Sean Woo-jin just left the cafe. The professor then contacted Berlin directly and told him that there was a hostage who got the smartwatch and tried to call the police. Berlin quickly gathered all the hostages. When Berlin was talking, Cho Young-min tried to turn on the watch and then he clicked the link that the police sent. But suddenly, Berlin summoned Cho Young-min and asked him to find out who took the watch. Before the director was about to come to Berlin, he gave the watch to Yoon Misin. Hearing that, Yoon Misin quickly hid the watch. But when Cho Young-min did the security check to Yoon Misin, who was helped by Berlin, they finally found out. The professor quickly called the police and said that this time he would give them a chance, but if there was the same incident, he couldn't guarantee anything. But Berlin seemed so angry, he broke the watch and even asked Denver to execute her. Denver refused, but he threatened he would kill him if he didn't want to do it. Furthermore, Tokyo was helping Nairobi to print money, so she was not there. Berlin also told Denver to not use feeling too much, because she might lie to Denver about her pregnancy. The professor tried to call them, but surely no one picked it up since they were busy with this incident. Then Denver took Yoon Misin to another room. While in the main hall, a staff member told Berlin that it was Cho Young-min's watch and it was not Yoon Misin's fault. At the same time, Rio quickly went to the money printing room to tell Tokyo. Immediately, Tokyo came to Denver and Yoon Misin to stop Denver. But before she got there, a gunshot rang out. Then back in the past, the professor met Moscow right after he got out from jail. The professor asked Moscow to join his plan. He also told Moscow to think about it first, because once Moscow decided to take it, Moscow couldn't step back. But Moscow directly decided to join his plan. He asked the professor to invite his son too in this plan. When Moscow tried to meet and talk with Denver, Denver was in the middle of the gangsters' pursuit that the gamblers rent to beat him. The gamblers rent them because they lost money because of Denver. After that, Denver and Moscow ran away from the gangster. Then Denver said that he would earn money so that his father could live in luxury. Hearing that, Moscow asked Denver to stop his nonsense and Moscow also told him to join the plan in order to end their bad life. Back to Denver and Yumi-san's scene, Denver was about to kill her. His first shot to the toilet's door, which was close to her, scared her. Then the second shot was heard by Tokyo, who was about to meet them. When Tokyo was already there, Yumi-san already lied on the floor with her blood. At the main hall, Berlin told Cho Young-min that he knew that it was Cho Young-min's mistake, but he didn't execute the director. It was a punishment for the director after all. After that, the situation became chaotic and a North Korean prisoner started to blame him. Other North Korean prisoners also followed him to blame Cho Young-min. Afterwards, Berlin came to the toilet to confirm whether Yumi-san was already dead. After that, Berlin asked Denver to assure nobody noticed her corpse. Then Tokyo tried to call the professor, but Rio stopped her. Not so long after that, Berlin came and explained why he asked Denver to execute Yumi-san, because the hostage was already beyond the limit. But Tokyo said Berlin was the one who went beyond the limit because the professor also had to know it. Then Berlin said that he would inform the professor. Immediately, the professor called again, yet Berlin told the professor that nothing happened and they just moved Yumi-san to another place in order to make her feel peaceful, because she was pregnant. And he also said that he threatened the hostages a bit so that no hostage would do it again. Then the professor asked Rio to analyze the log access to the broken watch to know what the police officers already knew from them. Then Tokyo and Denver were in a place in the building. It turns out that Yumi-san is still alive. So back at the toilet earlier, Yumi-san asked him to save her. She would pretend to be dead and Denver just shot her thigh. Immediately, Tokyo just arrived at the toilet. Afterwards, Tokyo reminded him that the both of them would be in trouble if Berlin and the others found out. Then Tokyo immediately cured Yumi-san's wound. When Tokyo was about to leave, Denver asked whether the professor already knew it or not, and Tokyo said not yet, but she thought that Berlin himself would kill Yumi-san if the professor already knew it. Then, they made plans to dethrone Berlin, but first they had to get rid of Helsinki and Oslo. But their plan was heard by Yumi-san and she seemed so surprised. Back to the police officers, they could see Rio from the smartwatch earlier and they started to track his identity and his crime record. Then they found out that he was a great hacker. Immediately, Sian Woo-jin realized that they may have come to the MKU building before their robbery act and she asked the officers to check all the CCTV in the MKU building. Back to the leader election, who would change the professor's position at the MKU's building. Berlin wanted to be leader, but Denver suggested his father to be the leader too. The professor couldn't grant Denver's wish since Moscow already has another important task, which is making an escape route for them to get out. But it turns out that the escape route is fake. It is an escape route for the prisoners, and the money heists would run away from the real route. This plan is to make the police officers chase them from the fake escape route. Afterwards, Denver told the hostages who were working that he wanted to go to the toilet. There was Cho Young-min too there. Soon Cho Young-min swore at him when Denver already left the room. Immediately, the prisoners who blamed him came and threatened him to not do anything stupid anymore. Because the North Korean hostages became anarchists, Cho Young-min even said that they were communist and the situation became chaotic. Not so long after that, Moscow came to intervene. But the North Korean prisoners said that they just gave him a warning because he sneaked out. Moscow just tried to remind them that they were a team that should have cooperated well while working. He also told Cho Young-min to stop being sneaky. Then they went for lunch. In the main hall, there were some noises because a student hostage's meal fell and he asked for more food. But the hostage who was in charge for the food couldn't give it, so some hostages argued about it. That situation made Nairobi come to them and said the in charge one to just give him the food. Seeing that, Moscow asked Berlin what was wrong with them and in case anything happened while he was working. But Berlin just said that it means the money heists management worked well, and he said why Moscow didn't ask Denver instead to know what happened earlier. Moscow quickly called and asked Denver, but Denver said that he didn't know anything. Not so long after that, Tokyo got out from the main hall to somewhere by emergency stairs, but Berlin asked Oslo to follow her. Immediately Denver followed Oslo and fought him until he fainted. Meanwhile, Yumi-san tried to go to a room to write a message to Cho Young-min. She wrote it in a small notebook in the room and informed him that she was still alive. At the same time, Helsinki suspected there was someone in the room. Yumi-san tried to hide from him. When he almost caught her, Tokyo pointed the gun to his head and asked him to put his gun down. Back to the professor, he followed up about the watch, and Rio said that no data was left, but there was transfer history. Based on the size, it could be a picture or short video. Then Berlin said that it would be a big problem if the police officers already found out one of the money heist's face. Hearing that, the professor would try his best to know what the police officers knew from the watch. After that, Berlin asked whether Rio was scared in case he was scared that his face was recorded on the watch. Meanwhile, the police officers already found out Rio and Nairobi, who were caught in a store's CCTV one day before the robbery act. Because they already knew about Rio's data, they searched information about Nairobi and tried to find other records in different times to know who they met there. Then the professor tried to call Sian Woo-jin as her crush, but her phone was still inactive. Afterwards, Xian Wujin's daughter named Mina was kidnapped by someone in a car. Xian Wujin's mother noticed that Mina was kidnapped and thought it was Xian Wujin's ex-husband who kidnapped her. She remembered that Xian Wujin forbade her granddaughter to meet her father. But, because Xian Wujin still couldn't be contacted, she looked for the professor's contact. Back at the MKU's building, Berlin started to influence Rio by asking why Tokyo always did what the professor asked her. But not so long after that, Tokyo pointed her gun at Berlin. She came with Denver, along with Oslo and Helsinki, who were helpless. Then Tokyo asked Rio to call the professor to tell him what happened, but the professor was away because he was in the police officer's location. Immediately a car alarm rang, and when a police officer tried to go to the alarm, he entered the police officer's location where Xian Wujin works. He came as her crush to inform her that her mother contacted him because she couldn't be contacted. He immediately gave his phone to her, and her mother told that Mina was taken by her father. Hearing that, Xian Wujin just told her mother that she would call her again. Realizing the professor entered her working room, which is supposed to be secret, she went outside and she took him outside too. Then she talked to his ex-husband and seemed so angry. After that, the professor asked about her ex-husband, but she treated the professor differently now. The fact that he entered the police officer's working room could end their relationship, but after all, the professor already found out that the police officers already knew about Rio and Nairobi when he was inside their working room. While the professor was away, Rio kept calling him, and surely the professor couldn't pick up the call. Then Berlin asked Tokyo to just ask the rest about his leadership instead of doing that. Then Tokyo got mad, but Berlin said that if she didn't agree, then she staged a coup in the professor's absence. Because they wanted to do re-election, Denver told all hostages to enter a room. Then Cho Young-min asked Denver to separate him from the North Korean hostages because they kept provoking him. But Denver couldn't believe him and thought of the director who was provoking him instead. Then Denver forced him to enter the same room. After Denver left, a North Korean told Cho Young-min again not to make trouble anymore, or else he, along with his fellow North Korean prisoners, would do something to the director. Then, Nairobi just entered the room to be asked about her opinion. Only Moscow, who wasn't there yet because he was busy with his job. Then the election started. Only Helsinki, Oslo and Berlin himself were in Berlin's side. Then the professor just came back and asked them what they were doing. Under Tokyo's threat, he said Tokyo wanted to dethrone him and told the professor that he killed a prisoner. Without telling whom, the professor already knew that it must be the pregnant lady, which is Yumi Sunday. Afterwards, the professor was so shocked and got mad. But Berlin said that Yumi-sun lied, and because of his decision, everything operated perfectly. But after that, he brought up an issue about one of them's identity, which the police officers already found out. Hearing that, Tokyo was so shocked. Immediately, Rio explained to Tokyo that it was still a possibility and the professor was still investigating it. Then the professor told them that the police officers found out Rio and Nairobi's identity. Tokyo was very angry to know that, and Rio looked panicked. Then the professor assumed that Rio's face was caught in the watch, and the police officers tracked the CCTV in the previous day. They got Nairobi's face in the CCTV record. Afterwards, Berlin told all of them that this thing wouldn't happen if they followed his way from the very beginning. Because in his opinion, the hostages thought that the money heist was weak. That was the thing he wanted to try to stop. Then Berlin apologized because he broke the rule without reporting it, but by becoming weak, this thing happened anyway. He said that someone had to get his hands dirty to make the plan work. Hearing that made Tokyo angry again and pointed her gun at him. She even said to Berlin that his hands were always dirty. Immediately, Berlin asked Rio and Nairobi opinions about his decision to kill Yemi Sunday. Hearing the fact earlier, surely they were in Berlin's side now. Nairobi pointed a gun at Tokyo and said that she had to act based on the condition. Then Denver influenced Rio to not be scared of this condition, because nothing was wrong if his face was known by the police officers. It surely made Rio mad. He said that it was easy for Denver to say that because that was not Denver's face. The situation was getting more chaotic. Rio even brought up Denver's mother, who left him, and said that Denver was from the criminal family who already killed people. Moscow already entered the room and heard their conversations and looked so shocked. When Denver was about to explain to his father, Berlin told Moscow first that Denver did it because he asked Denver. Then Moscow was so disappointed with Denver and scolded him. Moscow even got mad with the professor until Moscow fell on the floor. The rest were panicking, but Moscow said that he was alright. After that, Moscow left the room and Denver tried to chase him. After that, Berlin asked the professor why no hostage wasn't allowed to be killed. The professor explained that it was the main principle to make this plan work. Hearing that, Berlin told the professor that they could hide her so that it couldn't ruin the plan. Then there was a past scene about Moscow who told Denver not to do bad things like Moscow. He expected his son to live a normal and decent life. He felt bad because he thought he made his son enter jail several times. Then he told Denver to do the plan well, and after that they could live a decent life like other people. Back at the MKU building, Moscow opened the main escape route, and that made Denver surprised. At Rio's room, Berlin was talking about the next plan to the professor. Afterwards, Rio noticed someone open the main gate. The police officers already noticed it too, and the captain asked all units to go there. Outside, the police officers were ready with their guns. Denver quickly wore his mask and went outside too and asked his father to cover his face. The officers came closer. Then Moscow and Denver were in the middle of an argument. Even Moscow told him to surrender together with him, but Moscow would confess that he killed Yunmi Sunday. Cian Wu Jin already knew that the two of them were the thieves, because if one of them is a prisoner, he should have used a gun to stop the prisoner. The captain then asked the police to get ready. Meanwhile, Moscow and Denver still argued because Moscow thought that his son killed Yunmi Sunday. Finally, Moscow believed Denver because Denver told him to ask Tokyo. But right after that, Cian Wu Jin told them to surrender or else the police would kill them. Inside the building, the rest of the money heist prepared their plan. Berlin asked some hostages with the mask and gun, then went outside. There were other money heists too there. It made the police couldn't differentiate between the hostage and the money heists. The professor told Berlin that Berlin's plan was good but too risky because the hostage could run away. But Berlin explained that the hostages couldn't do that because they were scared. Since Berlin was very firm, he assumed that they thought they would be killed if they didn't obey Berlin. Immediately Nairobi told them that they just wanted to step back peacefully, and she asked the police to take their guns off. The police then confused what to do and not wanting to rush. Meanwhile, Moscow was told to wear mask. He also asked Tokyo about the truth, and Tokyo said he didn't kill Yemi Sunday. Then Denver told her father the truth, and it was heard by Rio. Back to the Berlin and the professor's conversation, the professor talked about whether Berlin controlled the other money heist sphere too, since the watch issue made some of them scared too. But Berlin said no and smiled. On the outside, hearing the fact that Yumi's son was still alive made Rio mad. Then Denver and Rio argued until Rio's gun fell. Meanwhile, Cho, a young man who wanted to run away, took his gun and he said to other money heists that he would shoot them. Then the money heists pointed a gun at him, but quickly Tokyo told the rest to take their gun off since she realized that the police targeted Cho Young Min. Not so long after that, Cho Young Min was shot. Then there was a past scene about the professor who told the money heists to do the surgery in case one of them was shot. But Rio looked like not interested. He said it was better that the bullet was in the body than it was operated by the beginner. Then the professor said that one of them wasn't a beginner. After that, Rio said it looked like a joke. Then he left and even went home. Rio seemed to have a bad relationship with his father. He told his father that he did bad things and came home because he had no money. It turned out that his father said he would enter Rio's application again to his campus, so his father forced him to take the medical major. After that, Rio went to a pub by his sport car. The professor and Tokyo followed him, and they told him that once he joined the plan, he couldn't quit. Tokyo asked whether Rio told his family about the plan. If he did, his family would be in danger. Then the professor gave Rio advice that he couldn't keep running away because it would be a habit and one day he had to face it. Back at the present, Young Min was shot and the money heists immediately took him inside. Inside the building, they helped Young Min. Young Min also asked to call his wife. Young Min was dying and Rio was asked to do something by the money heists, but he had a fear of blood. Meanwhile, the professor called and blamed the police for the earlier incident. Then Wu Jin offered to send Young Min to the hospital, but surely the professor couldn't agree with that. After that, Wu Jin asked permission from the professor to let the medic team enter the MKU building. Then the professor said that he would think about it in 10 minutes. Outside the tent, Captain Mohyuk talked to Wu Jin and he told her that he would enter the MKU building as the medical team. At the same time, the professor informed Berlin about it, and Berlin didn't agree with it because they couldn't know the police's plan by allowing the medical team to enter the building, and if Young Min died, it was the police who shot him anyway. But the professor reminded him that Berlin's punishment was just delayed and this incident happened because of him, and the professor didn't want more victims. Then the professor contacted the police and asked the medic to come an hour later. After that, Captain Mohyuk told Chonsu the plan. The captain would enter the MKU building normally as the medic team to see the condition, while some North Korean police wore the money heist dress and mask and infiltrated to the building. At the MKU building, Berlin asked Oslo to take Young Min to the exhibition room. The hostages who saw Young Min got surprised. Then the hostages were asked to gather at the main hall. Meanwhile, Moscow along with Denver went to the room where there was Missing. Denver couldn't tell the professor since Berlin was still the leader inside the MKU building. They were surprised when someone entered the room because it could be Berlin, but luckily they were Rio and Tokyo. Then Rio checked Missing's condition and told them that she could lose her leg if she wasn't surgically operated on soon. Tokyo asked Rio to do the surgery and Denver could steal the scalpel from the medic team. But Rio refused because Berlin could find out. After that, Denver said he would try to do it since he shot her. Then Missing asked Denver what he meant by the medic entering the building and Tokyo told her that a police officer shot a hostage mistakenly. Missing then found out that the victim was Young Min. Afterwards, Missing gave him a letter that she wrote earlier. She asked him to give it to Young Min since it could be the last moment for Missing and Young Min. At the police tent, Captain Muhyuk told a police named Chul about the place to infiltrate. Not so long after that, the medic team arrived. Wu Jin asked them to do the surgery as much time as possible without affecting the surgery. Back at the MKU building, Tokyo and Denver entered the exhibition room. When Denver was about to give Missing's letter to Young Min, he cancelled it because Berlin just arrived. Berlin informed Young Min that they were ready to contact Young Min's wife. Long story short, Young Min talked to his wife by phone and he told her that he felt alive because he heard her voice. He also told her to tell their children that he loved them and he said that he loved his wife too. It made Denver not give the letter to Young Min. Back at the police tent, Captain Muhyuk told the plan to Chonsu, then Wu Jin gave him a wireless glass so that the police could know the situation inside the MKU building. In the building, Tokyo asked all hostages to put the money heist's mask on and get ready with the gun. Not so long after that, the medic team entered the building. The professor noticed that one of them was the police and immediately informed Berlin about it. Berlin then came to the gate and asked other money heists to do the checking correctly. The security checking device noticed the wireless glass, but the money heist thought that was just usual glass. Meanwhile, the police infiltrators already tried to infiltrate to the building in money heist's uniform and mask. After that, the medic team was doing the surgery. Berlin came and asked the doctor to do the surgery faster. Then he pointed a gun at the doctor and the doctor looked so nervous. He said that the doctor couldn't do the surgery if he was nervous. Berlin then asked Captain Muhyuk to do the surgery instead. Berlin quickly asked who the captain was and the captain finally admitted that he was a police. Captain Muhyuk said that the civil workers must be accompanied by the police to make sure the medic's safety. After that, the medic continued the surgery. At the director's room, Rio checked the CCTV and he found nothing wrong. But the professor had a bad feeling. Then the professor noticed that the glass that Captain Muhyuk wore was the wireless one and there must be an infiltrator who entered in a place without CCTV. Then the professor told the money heist about his plan. After the medic team had finished, they passed the main hall and Captain Muhyuk, surprised to know the hostage's mask changed. Meanwhile, the police infiltrators was successful to infiltrate already, but Wu Jin told them to just go back and cancel the plan since they changed the mask. Actually, the professor had predicted this thing before. When this thing happened, the money heist could take the advantage by tagging the police's device. And Rio already did it to Captain Muhyuk's cell phone. After that, Denver and Tokyo went to the room where Missing stayed. Denver stole scalpel from the medic and tried to do the surgery to Missing, but since Denver was a beginner, Tokyo assumed that it wouldn't work and she wanted to call Rio. Tokyo went to the director's room while Denver still tried to do the surgery. But when Tokyo arrived at the director's room, Berlin already noticed that they hid something from him and threatened Rio that Berlin would take her to the police if Rio didn't reveal it. Then finally Berlin went to Missing's room with Oslo along with the gun. At first Berlin pointed the gun at Denver, but then he pointed it to Missing and about to kill her. But Denver blocked it and Berlin wanted to shoot Denver too. Luckily Nairobi came in time and she pointed the gun at Berlin. She rescued Tokyo and Rio and they came there with guns too. It turned out Nairobi found Missing's letter that Denver mistakenly fell in the exhibition room. Meanwhile, Missing was dying and Tokyo asked Rio to do the surgery. At first he didn't want to do it and Tokyo who did it, but finally Rio wanted to do it because he remembered his conversation with Tokyo earlier. After the surgery is done, Rio vomited because he had blood fear. He told Tokyo that his father forced him to go to medical university even though he knew Rio's condition. His father told Rio that Rio didn't want to try hard. Suddenly Rio told Tokyo that he would stop to be childish, since all he did just tried hard to ruin his father's reputation. He had never thought about what he wanted. He also said that he would buy an island and live there with Tokyo. Hearing that made Tokyo left the toilet. After that, Denver gave his blood to Missing. Since Denver told Missing that he gave her letter to Young Min and Young Min said that he loved Missing, Missing could notice that Denver lied because young men had never said that to her. Finally, Denver said the truth to her. Missing ended up said thanks to him for saving her life. Then Tokyo called the professor to inform that Missing was still alive. He then asked Tokyo to be the new leader, and Berlin was encaged without gun until he was needed. Meanwhile, the media was talking about the police and made bad image of Wu Jin because young men was shot. Wu Jin's mother watched the news about it and said Wu Jin tried to save life while they talked bad about her. Hearing that, Wu Jin, who just arrived home, cried, and she quickly went outside and told her mother she got a call. But actually, she just wanted to cry without her mother knew. After that, Wu Jin came to the professor's cafe, but it was closed. When she was about to go, the professor opened the door and she said she needed to say sorry to him. The professor talked about the news that talked about her, but she said it was just usual thing at times. She then wanted to go to her car, but the professor said that it would be hard for her to pretend that she was strong as police and the person who her family relied on her. After that, the professor offered her to come inside and talk since she needed time to talk at that moment. But at the same time, one police infiltrator, who is Chulwu, was still inside the MKU building because the money heist came earlier. He decided to hide from them at first and continued the police's plan. Then there is a scene about Sean Wu Jin and her ex-husband's divorce trial. Sean Wu Jin wants to get her child's custody because her ex-husband did domestic violence to her, but no witness except her mother named Park Pilson, who is very old already. Her ex-husband's attorney said they couldn't believe it since it was written by Wu Jin's mother. Then the court judge said that her mother should come to the next trial. The thing is, her ex-husband is a politician who is an expert in planning and a strong candidate for the next presidential election. After the trial, her ex-husband was asked by the reporters, but he said that she lied. After that, in the office, Mina is calling her to inform that Park Pilson is gone. Then they were looking for her, and finally they found her at a park. When Wu Jin asked her what she was doing in the park, Park Pilson said that she didn't remember. Back at home, Wu Jin asked her mother to go to the hospital, but her mother refused because she was alright and would wait until the next Wu Jin and her ex-husband's trial. Afterwards, Wu Jin met the professor and she told him about her child and her mother. She said that she couldn't show her weak side to her child and her mother because they depend on her. Meanwhile, Captain Cha Mohyuk tried to contact Park Chulwu, his man who was in the middle of infiltration. His last message to the officer was that the infiltration was successful, then he couldn't be contacted. The captain then asked the officer to tell him in case Park Chulwu contacted again. Then the captain went outside. Not so long after that, a North Korean official took the captain somewhere by car. He was asked to be quiet and not tell anyone about the North Korean police's infiltration since the money heists always knew their plan. Even Wu Jin was suspected as the one who leaked out their plan to money heists. The North Korean government said the money heist hacked a South Korean police officer's profile and leaked their bad information to the press. The North Korean government also noticed that seeing Wu Jin as the chosen negotiator is part of the money heist's plan. In short, the government noticed that money heists used Wu Jin, but they didn't know yet the relationship between Wu Jin and the money heist. Then the captain was asked to tell Park Chulwu to end this incident soon, even if it took a victim. Meanwhile, at the professor's house, Wu Jin woke up and was about to go to a room where the professor contacted the money heist. Luckily, the professor came. Wu Jin asked about the room and said it was a storage room. He then offered her breakfast. At the MKU's building, Park Chulwu secretly went to another room when other hostages were sleeping. But and realized it. The captain then asked Park Chulwu to end it soon by finding the leader and killing him, because without him, the money heist couldn't do anything. After that, the captain said that other police officers would go inside the building too. The captain also told Park Chulwu that the priority is to kill the professor no matter what the consequence was. Then the captain told other police officers to do it quietly because it was suspected there was a traitor in the joint team. Back at the MKU's building, Rio came to give food to Berlin. He asked Berlin why he was sweating, then Berlin told Rio that he got a serious illness and he asked Berlin to take his medicine in the director's room, but Rio thought that Berlin lied to him. At the main hall, Nairobi told the hostages that Berlin was not in charge for a while, and she also told Yoon Misin was still alive. Then she said that she didn't want to hurt the hostages and she asked the hostage to cooperate well. At the police location, since the media was mocking them, Wu Jin asked the officers to have a spirit again to help the hostages. Not so long after that, Captain Mohyuk came and asked whether Wu Jin met with the professor. Because Wu Jin thought that it was a private question, she replied to the captain inconveniently, but she told him after all that she spent the night at the professor's house. After that, Wu Jin called the professor. She thanked him because he accepted the cooperation to take care of the director. She also told him about the mask changing. Afterwards, in order to build the professor's trust, she offered to give him the food supply. Yoon Chon-soo told her to exchange the offering with him, but she didn't do it because if she did it, the professor would know that the police officer would attack them after that. At MKU's building, the hostages started to have trust on the money heist. Then the director talked to Yoon Misin. He said that he thought she was dead, then he lied that he tried to kill the money heist too. But Misin seemed to avoid him. Not so long after that, Denver came and asked her to go to another room to change the bandage. The director said that he got wounded too, but Denver said he was treated by the doctor already, and then Denver and Misin went to another room. After Denver changed her bandage, Misin said it wouldn't happen if the money heist didn't come and she is a hostage and Denver is a thief after all. And from that day, Misin said that she would change her own bandage, but then Misin fell on the floor. It was seen by Park Chul-woo. Then he was about to go to another place, but he met Cho Young-min. As the director, he knew that he wasn't his staff and he wasn't a school teacher or student. But then realized he was a police officer, and she lied to the director that Park Chul-woo was the school's bus driver in a different place, and asked Park Chul-woo about the police's plan. Then he asked about the professor, and said she didn't know, but she knew someone who might know. At the MKU site, Woo Jin prepared the food. She told the staff to not give sandwiches. But he told her that MKU didn't have that kind of food since the menu is Korean food. Hearing that, it made Woo Jin realize that the professor was not in the building, since the professor said that he had a sandwich as his breakfast earlier. But Captain Mohyuk said that she just assumed it, and for the fact that the money heist's always one step ahead, he said that they just might have a spy around the police. Then Woo Jin asked the officer to track a car that was recorded by CCTV. She thought that the professor who drove the car since the money heists were still inside the building. Then there was a past scene of Denver and Rio who prepared the equipment for the professor in the professor's room. Rio said that the place was too light. Denver also told the professor if the professor got caught by the police, he would pretend that he didn't know the professor. After that, Rio said that if the professor got caught, the money heists would be messed up if they found out the professor wasn't in the building. At the MKU building, Park Chul-woo and N came to the ladies' toilet to ask Misin about the professor. Then Misin told about what happened earlier. From that, they assumed the professor was not Denver or Berlin. Park Chul-woo assumed that the other money heist was the professor. Meanwhile, Cho Young-min knocked the toilet's door harshly, and he talked in a very loud voice because he thought that Misin was there with Denver. Misin still pushed the door to avoid the director entering the toilet. The director realized there was a guy in the toilet, so he found out that Park Chul-woo was a police officer. The noise made Oslo came to the toilet and asked. Park Chul-woo already hid inside the toilet. Cho Young-min said he went to the wrong toilet, but Oslo still checked the toilet doors one by one. When he was about to find Park Chul-woo, Helsinki came and told Oslo that the professor was looking for him. At the director's room, Oslo was asked about the car that was recorded on the CCTV. Oslo said that he gave extra money to crush the car. He didn't see whether the car was really crushed or not. Then Oslo told the professor the car place, which is Hyunch Car World. Hearing the place, Tokyo seemed to know the place. At the same time, the police also found out the place, and Woo Jin and the officers immediately went to the place, as well as the professor too. Because of it, they still didn't know yet about Park Chul-woo, who was in the MKU building. Then Misin asked Chul-woo what the police would do after he found out about the professor. And Chul-woo said that he would take him outside, then do the attacks afterwards, and noticed that would make the hostages in a dangerous situation, and when you killed the professor, it didn't mean to make the other thieves surrender. She suggested he threaten them to do the evacuation instead. But Chul-woo said to not make the situation more complicated. Finally, they made plan to trap Denver, then torture him until he revealed who the professor was. After that, a hostage gave him a letter. In the letter, Misin told her to go to a storage room since she wanted to inform him something. When Denver was in the storage room already, Chul-woo beat him with something so that Denver fainted. Then Chul-woo along with Cho Young-min tortured him. Afterwards, Chul-woo asked about the professor, but Denver didn't reveal it. The director then guessed that the professor was Tokyo, since he saw Denver said that Tokyo was his leader. Tokyo dethroned Berlin and rescued Misin too. In the police site, Captain Mohyuk was told that the North Korean police found the professor. Then the captain instructed the officers to kill the professor. Meanwhile, the professor was in a rush to go to Hyunch Car World. He infiltrated to take the key and planned to burn the car, but the police already arrived too. Back at the building, An's friend asked her what the director's plan was because he worried about the hostage's condition. Then An told him about the police's plan to attack the money heists and would make the hostages in dangerous condition. Afterwards, Chulwa took his gun and turned on the fire alarm to shift the other's focus. Outside, the police were preparing to do attacks. Captain Mohyuk influenced Yun Chansu to approve these attacks while Wu Jin was away. In the storage room, Cho Youngmin still tortured Denver. Then Misin entered the room and stopped Youngmin. Because Youngmin wanted to beat Denver by a crowbar, immediately Misin pointed a gun at Youngmin and she threatened him that she would kill him. Hearing that, Youngmin argued with Misin. After that, Denver kicked Youngmin until Youngmin fainted. Then Misin helped Denver to be free and immediately Denver looked for Tokyo. Facing this kind of situation, Tokyo asked Nairobi to gather all the hostages and asked Rio to check Berlin. Tokyo herself would check the exhibition room. Back at the Hyunch car world, the professor tried to hide but police already noticed the professor was in the car. Back at the MKU building, Rio found that something was wrong with Berlin. Rio opened his handcuffs, but Berlin choked Rio's neck until he fainted. In the exhibition room, Chulwa already targeted Tokyo, but when he was about to kill her, Denver arrived in time and told Tokyo that there was an intruder and they needed to inform the professor soon. After that, Tokyo noticed there was someone who wanted to kill her, then a gunshot was heard. Afterwards, Chulwa informed Captain Mohyuk that the professor wasn't in the building. After informing that, Chulwa couldn't be contacted. At the same time, the professor decided to drive the car to run away. It made Wu Jin chase him by car too. Then there was a past scene about the professor who lectured university students about the economic impact of reunification. A politician who is Wu Jin's ex-husband named King Sangman also listened to his lecturer. Afterwards, King Sangman took him to meet other officials in order to grant his wish and the professor cooperated with them. After that, back to the scene where the professor was chased by the police. He drove very fast, because a guy blocked the road. The professor finally decided to hit the roadblock. But, the police were still chasing him. Meanwhile, at the MKU building, Chulwa was about to kill Tokyo and Denver arrived in time. He told Tokyo about Chulwa and they needed to inform the professor soon. Hearing that, Chulwa cancelled to kill Tokyo and after that, Berlin shot Chulwa. At the same time, the professor even passed the tomatoes farm so that the tomatoes were on the car window's glass. It made the tomatoes block the professor's face when the professor was already surrounded by the police car. When the police came out with their guns, the professor drove backwards. Back at the MKU building, Chulwa informed the captain about the professor who wasn't at the building, but after that Berlin broke his HT so that Chulwa couldn't be contacted anymore. Berlin then shot Chulwa many times. At the same time, the professor managed to run away from the police and burn the car. At the MKU site, the reporters asked the police about the gunshots. Then, Wu Jin was informed about the professor who was outside the building, so the police noticed that he could be the professor. Back at the police site, Wu Jin got mad because she didn't know about the attack plan. Based on many gunshots, the police assumed that Chulwa was dead already. Then, Wu Jin asked the reason why she wasn't informed. After knowing the reason is because he was suspected as the money heist spy, she looked surprised, but because of her action who chased the professor, Captain Mohyuk didn't suspect her anymore. Then the police discussed why the money heist still didn't have any clarification about the gunshots. Wu Jin also brought up the issue of why in the money heist's hostage, the money heist didn't want to kill. Then Yun Chansu thought that the money heists might want to be like Robin Hood. Based on that, Wu Jin assumed that the money heists care about the public opinion much and she planned to enter the building. At the MKU building, Tokyo was so down because of the earlier incident and Nairobi cheered her up. Knowing she still didn't manage to make Tokyo better, Nairobi then also complimented Tokyo because Tokyo told the professor about Hyunch Carworld's information. The money heist could still go on. Afterwards, Nairobi asked Tokyo to talk to the professor. At the director's room, Tokyo asked the professor to make Berlin the leader again. Because she thought that Berlin's way of giving fear to the hostages is right. But Berlin refused it and he just wanted the plan to be successful. Suddenly, Wu Jin called the professor to ask about the shooting sound, but the professor said it was just a shooting exercise. Wu Jin also made sure that there was no killing incident there. She then asked the professor to enter the MKU building to make sure there were no victims and broadcast it. After that, the professor told the money heists to not let the public know what they were doing, in short, no hostage who would leak it to the police. Inside the building, Tokyo asked Helsinki and Oslo to gather the hostages at the main hall. Before going to the main hall, Youngmin met Misin. He got mad with her because she was a traitor who stood in the thief's side. Youngmin was about to slap her, but luckily Denver came to stop it and he also threatened Youngmin not to tell what happened at the storage room. At the main hall, Tokyo told the hostages that Wu Jin would come to check their condition, but interrupted and asked about the dead police. Not so long after that, Berlin came and said that they just did a shooting exercise. Then Berlin also introduced himself to the hostages, even telling them his full identity. After that, Tokto told the hostages to take a bath at the toilet and told the vice director to do something when the police came, since there was one victim. But the vice director said that the money heists just threatened them. Not so long after that, young men came and asked and to inform by paper that there was a victim, how many the thieves were and their identity, and they were printing money. Because he said, the money heists wouldn't harm Anne. And agreed, and she would write it on the money that the vice director took at the printing money room. Outside, the police already prepared for the broadcast, and there were King Sangman and Anne's parents too. Then Wu Jin entered the MKU's building, and Berlin greeted her without a mask. Then a hostage was called at the main hall one by one to meet Wu Jin and say something to their family. Wu Jin also asked the hostages about the shooting, but they had no idea about it, and the hostages said to Wu Jin that there was no victim. When it was Anne's turn, she pretended to cry, so Wu Jin came closer to her. When Anne was about to give the written money, Tokyo stopped it and asked her to go back. In another room, Tokyo noticed it and the money heists found the written money, and Tokyo and Berlin got mad at her. After that, Berlin went back to the main hall. Wu Jin asked him to just gather all the hostages to make it quicker. Afterwards, Wu Jin checked the hostages list. Knowing Wu Jin was done, Berlin asked her to get out. But it turns out the police added Chulwa in the list. Wu Jin even said that Chulwa was a contract security officer. Surely, Berlin said no hostage with that name. Then Wu Jin asked the hostage about Chulwa. Berlin asked young men about it to make sure. Under threat, young men told Wu Jin that it was just a shooting exercise. Wu Jin kept pushing Berlin to admit, but Berlin said he never saw his face. Then Wu Jin asked Anne, and finally said she saw him. Young men also told Wu Jin so. Wu Jin then asked where Chulwa was and whether the money heists killed him. Hearing that, Berlin broke the hostages list paper. Then the situation became a bit chaotic. Wu Jin pushed him to admit the money heists killed him. After that, Berlin revealed it was the police who sent the agent and the money heists just offended him. Wu Jin said the money heists broke the rule by killing people. She also brought up the issue that she did her best to negotiate for the hostages' safety. Because of this incident, she said that she couldn't negotiate anymore. Berlin said that the police just wanted to release Anne so the police could attack money heists. But then Wu Jin negotiated to not only release Anne, but all students. Because of being pushed, finally Berlin told them to watch what really happened. A police officer was given a flash disk where there were CCTV records about Chulwa, who was about to kill Tokyo. Then they brought Chulwa at the main hall, who turned out he is still alive. The police officers were surprised because he is still alive. Back to the conversation with the professor earlier, Berlin told the professor about Chulwa. Even though Berlin really wanted to kill him in the head, but he shot Chulwa's heart instead. It turned out Chulwa wore anti-bullet dress. Berlin already obeyed the professor's principle to not killing people. Then, the professor asked them to take benefit from the fact that the police thought Chulwa was dead. Then the CCTV records were broadcasted. In the records, clearly Chulwa was an intruder who wanted to kill money heists. Berlin also told them about the police's next plan to attack the money heists. Berlin also said that the hostages knew nothing about it. If the killing plan was successful and the police attacked, he didn't know the hostages' condition after that. Surely, Berlin used this condition to blame Wu Jin and all policies. He said that the police only pretended to care about the hostage while it was just the police's reason to use them. Hearing that, the public outside the building got mad and yelled at the police. After that, Wu Jin and the cameraman left the MKU's building. Inside the building, the money heists were watching TV about the news. Tokyo reminded them that the professor forbade them to watch TV. But Nairobi said that they were just enjoying the moment. Then Denver complimented Berlin because he did a good job. After that, following Tokyo's request, Berlin just turned off the TV. Not so long after that, Moscow came. Rio asked him in case there was a new problem, but Moscow just informed them about the soil that already appeared. It means that it was ready to be dug. Hearing that, Nairobi told the rest that the money also almost finished so that in 3 days they could get out of MKU's building. Hearing that, they were really happy. Meanwhile, in another room, Berlin was injected with medicine to his body. At the police site, the police fired Captain Mahyuk to continue the joint team. Wu Jin didn't agree about it and asked Jun Changsu to just fire her instead. But Changsu said that the public opinion made him have no other choice. But Wu Jin quickly replied it was just because they had no substitute negotiator to replace Wu Jin. She even said that if they fired Captain Mohyuk, she would resign too. Outside the police site, the captain told Woo Jin that he deserved to be fired and she didn't need to do that. But Captain Mohyuk said he wouldn't give up and he would track who the professor was. Then he asked about Park Sunho, who was the professor. He said that he suspected Park Sunho was the professor, but she thought that Park Sunho was not the typical person who hurts other people. After that, Woo Jin got mad and ended the conversation. After that, Woo Jin asked the professor to meet up. Woo Jin was already drunk when the professor arrived. He started to drink too, but Woo Jin grabbed his bottle first. Woo Jin had a great time and forgot the fact for a while. So did the professor, not as the thief's leader, but as a cafe owner. He sat in front of her without feeling guilty or confused. Afterwards, the two of them talked before going home. The professor told Woo Jin to just quit the joint team. Woo Jin looked surprised, but the professor explained because she looked tired. The professor started to fall in love with her. The words were unplanned and even it could ruin his plan if Woo Jin did it. Not so long after that, Woo Jin's mother called her. Woo Jin told her that she would come home late. When she put her phone in her pocket, she realized there was a paper shred, money shred to be exact. She already found out that and put money shred along with the serial number. She quickly said to the professor that she had to go. Then when the professor just arrived at his home, Captain Mohyuk came. Then there was a past scene about Captain Cha Mohyuk. In the past during the Cold War, the captain is just like the angel of death for the double police agent. Captain Mohyuk was about to kill a double police agent who is his friend. But before it happened, his friend said that the disunity era had ended and people like himself and Mohyuk would only be thrown away. Then years later, what his friend said was true. Captain Mohyuk was just like a security officer. The joint economic era made all Mohyuk's sacrifice burn to ashes. Back at the professor's cafe, Captain Mohyuk came to meet him. Meanwhile, at the police's tent, Woo Jin asked about the captain and she was told that the captain was investigating something. After that, Woo Jin told the officers about the money shred and by her instinct she told them that the hostage and the money heists were printing money there. Then Woo Jin tried to contact Captain Mohyuk but he didn't pick it up. Afterwards, an officer asked Woo Jin about the serial number, although the money heists could print the money but it could be traced. Woo Jin reminded him that the money heists got a really good hacker, and they might have a printing expert too. Then the police officers decided to check the electricity usage at the MKU building. Back at the professor's cafe, Captain Mohyuk asked the reason why the professors didn't open the cafe publicly yet, and the professor answered that he hadn't done enough market research yet. Not so long after that, Captain Mohyuk asked the professor about the toilet's location. But it turned out the captain went to the room where the professor usually contacted the money heists. Quickly the professor came and told him about the exact location of the toilet. The professor also explained to the captain that the room was his private room which was filled with his hobby's equipment. But before leaving, Captain Mohyuk took an item there. The captain quickly contacted the forensic to check the fingerprint in the item earlier. Because the professor bugs the captain's cell phone, he already found out about it. At the printing money room, Nairobi asked a hostage who was looking at his family's picture. She also asked about his child in the picture. The hostage then asked whether Nairobi got a child too, but she said that she was not a mother. Meanwhile at the director's room, Berlin looked for his medicine which ran out. He quickly hid it in a book before Tokyo and Rio came. In another room, a group of hostages talked about the police. They thought that they didn't really care about them. A hostage also talked about and who bravely revealed about Chulwu to Woo Jin. He wondered why she found out about it. The director came and told them it was simply because she was a US ambassador's daughter. Then the hostage judged the police only cared about and didn't care about the rest hostages' safety. Meanwhile at the government side, the US ambassador who is An's father threatened Kim Sang-man. If something happened to her, the inter-Korean summit would be cancelled and Kim Sang-man and Mr. O wouldn't get any money from this summit. Hearing that, Mr. O also threatened Kim Sang-man if he didn't get any money, then he would stop giving funds to make Kim Sang-man president. After that, Mr. O told Kim Sang-man just needed to make An safe and he told Kim Sang-man something. At the police's tent, Yoon Chan-soo informed Woo Jin that they were told to stop bugging the MKU building. Outside the tent, Kim Sang-man said to the public that the government couldn't tolerate terrorism that would cause further violence and conflict. Then Sang-man persuaded the money heists to solve this incident. He brought the hostages' families too. He promised that he would help the money heist who wanted to cooperate with him. There were Rio's parents too and Rio looked so emotional. Not so long after that, the professor called and asked if one of them was interested in Kim Sang-man's offering. The professor also asked Rio to do something to Captain Mohyuk's cell phone. After that, Tokyo noticed that there were Ryo's parents on the TV earlier and she asked Ryo whether he was alright or not. She confirmed if she wasn't afraid that he would be a traitor, then Ryo left the room. In another room, two hostages who were Anne's classmates talked about Anne in front of her because they thought the police only wanted to save Anne. Moreover, they thought that all students became hostages because of her too. Before Anne was about to talk with them, her friend came and told her to neglect it. He also asked her to rescue him in case Anne would be rescued. Then at the director's room, someone with a money heist's mask came and took a cell phone and called Kim Sang-man. After that, Sang-man asked to do something first. Then, Anne got a letter. It was written that she would be helped to get out from the MKU building. She was also asked to meet up in the basement at 1 p.m. At the police's tent, the police officers already found out that there would be added money that would be printed based on the summit's result, which is 4 trillion won. The serial numbers of them were unknown. After that, Woo Jin met Kim Sang-man to talk about it. She said that because of it, the money heists could print it freely. She also noticed that Sang-man already found out about it so that he started to take control. After that, Woo Jin asked whether there was a money heist who called him, but he said that it was none of her business. But it turned out he revealed that it was for Anne. Woo Jin then assumed that Sang-man wanted to kill Anne. Afterwards, Woo Jin got mad at him and asked him to stop it. Not so long after that, Woo Jin told the professor about it. The money heists then quickly looked for Anne in every room of the MKU building. At the director's room, Ryo found out that the traitor had placed a bomb in the storage room. By CCTV, Tokyo then found out that the traitor put the bomb on the top of the safe. Tokyo and Ryo immediately went there. Tokyo was about to reach the bomb. Luckily Ryo came and saved Tokyo, because the bomb exploded. Hearing the sound, the situation became chaotic and the hostages asked Oslo about Anne's condition. Oslo answered in a high tone that he didn't know, but immediately Anne appeared and the hostages greeted her. Meanwhile, the money heists couldn't find out the traitor yet. Then they suspected each other, and at that moment, the hostages reunited after Anne's comeback. Anne told other hostages that she was about to meet the traitor at first, but she realized that she felt bad for the other hostages and the hostages would be in a dangerous situation after she left the building. After most of the hostages left, she told the vice director and the director that beside those reasons, she found out where the money heist put Chulwa too. At the police's tent, Woo Jin asked the professor about his intention to do this robbery. The professor refused to answer it and asked her to mind about Kim Sang-man instead. She also told him that she already found out that the professor was outside the building too. Then the professor told her that he only wanted to produce a lot of money with any victim. After that, Woo Jin asked the officers to start the bugging again. She didn't care about the government who only care about the summit's profit. From that moment, Woo Jin planned to stop the money heists from printing money by cutting the electricity. After started bugging again, the officer found there were some texts from the hostage's cell phone and Captain Cha Moo-hyuk. The texts clearly showed that the captain is the money heist spy. It turned out the professor asked Ryo to manipulate the captain's cell phone by making fake messages. Ryo also worked hard to make sure the captain's cell phone couldn't contact Woo Jin. Meanwhile, at the forensic, Captain Moo-hyuk asked an officer about the result, but the regulation says it has to wait some time and the captain asked him to do it quickly. After that, there were some detectives who wanted to arrest the captain and Captain Moo-hyuk fought them. He quickly went to the forensic room and he used the computer there and there was the professor's data. Back at the director's room, Berlin suspected Ryo as the traitor. He noticed that his parents were on the TV earlier. Moreover, he is still so childish and always runs away from things that he isn't comfortable with. Then the professor said that they need to find out the traitor, but if they focused on that, the situation would be chaotic. At the police tent, Woo Jin and Captain Moo-hyuk couldn't contact each other. The officer then came and told them that Captain Moo-hyuk ran away. Yoon Chon-soo thought that was because he was the money heist spy, but Woo Jin felt something was wrong because the captain already told her the previous day that he suspected Park Sun-ho was the professor. At the MKU's building, and asked Oslo to join the cooking team, because one of the cooking team was ill and told her to replace her and then said that she kept overthinking if she just sat and did nothing. Meanwhile, Captain Moo-hyuk went to Woo Jin's house, but only her mother who was there. But before he knocked the door, the professor pointed a gun at his head. The captain then fought him and he finally fainted because he got drugged. After that, he took Captain Moo-hyuk at the back of the car that the professor drove. Woo Jin's mother noticed what happened and shocked. The professor who realized that was about to kill her, but he felt sorry because he already liked Woo Jin. Moreover, when she was calling Woo Jin, he just found out that she had dementia. So he just cancelled it and left. Back at the MKU building, Young Min noticed that the money heist's focus was on the traitor and the hostages took advantage of it and put a letter in the food for the security officer, and finally Chulwa got it. After that, Young Min put some equipment like a crowbar, screwdriver and flashlight inside the water closet, then Chulwa took them. Meanwhile, Berlin still investigated the traitor and still suspected Rio. He said that Rio was the one who really knows the CCTV's location. Back at the professor, he just arrived home using his white car. He saw Wu Jin and he told her that he had urgent business. Wu Jin said that she missed him and already realized that he already knew about her a lot, but the professor seldom told her about him. The professor then asked her to come in, but Wu Jin immediately pointed a gun at him and asked him to go to the storage room, which is the room where the professor contacts the money heist. After that, Wu Jin was surprised to know that it was just a storage room. She then apologized and explained what happened. The professor got mad and quickly ended their relationship. Back at the MKU building, Rio got mad because Berlin kept accusing him that he was a traitor. He even pointed a gun at him because Rio said it was better for Rio to kill himself than be a traitor and kill Anne. But Berlin stopped because she pointed the gun at Berlin. Seeing that, making Nairobi surprised too. Meanwhile, Oslo told Helsinki that he wanted to give water to the security officer in the basement. After that, the professor set the equipment to contact the money heist again. He was shocked to know that the money heists still suspected each other. Berlin even threatened Rio if Rio didn't tell the truth, Berlin would kill Tokyo. Moreover, the professor also noticed that Chulwa was about to hit Oslo. At the same time, Wu Jin instructed the officer to cut the electricity. Then there was past scene about the money heist who were in the last class. After that they did a party and drink. Nairobi then asked the professor to drink together and tried to seduce him, but he refused it, even forced her to get out from his room. At the same time, Nairobi saw Rio, who was rejected by Tokyo. Seeing that, Nairobi asked Rio to drink together, but Rio rejected her too. She then got mad, knocked Berlin, Moscow and Denver's door to ask them, but none of them cared. After that, Nairobi came to Oslo and Helsinki to drink together. She found out that they are from the same orphanage. Then they told Oslo's story, who had to slaughter the gang members to get out from that, just because Oslo looked for his mother who turncoat to the South Korea. Oslo told it with tears. That made Nairobi cry too. She said that it reminded of his son who got the same age as Oslo. Hearing that, Helsinki laughed at her and said that she was a really good imposter and it was impossible that she got a son. Back at the MKU building, the money heist shocked because of the electricity cut. It made the professor couldn't contact them too. At the same time, Oslo was hit and the security officers along with Chulwa stole Oslo's lift card and took his gun. The hostages were also surprised because the electricity cut was not part of the plan. Then young men told Miss in the plan that they would cooperate to get out from the MKU building. Meanwhile, Tokyo told money heists that it was not the time to fight each other. Then she told Helsinki to check the hostages first. Helsinki asked the hostage because they squatted. Immediately, Chulwa attacked him. While Chulwa pushed Helsinki, he asked the hostages to run away. Then Tokyo said she would turn on the emergency electricity. She told Rio to go to the director's room, and Berlin and Nairobi went to the exhibition room. Meanwhile, Chulwa tried to kill Helsinki, so Helsinki did many shots. It made Berlin and Nairobi, along with Berlin and Moscow, go to the gunshot sound. After the emergency electricity was turned on, they found Helsinki, who fainted. Afterwards, the professor called Rio and told him where the hostages were about to go. At the same time, Helsinki woke up and he immediately went to the security officer's room to check Oslo without saying anything to other money heists. After that, Rio told money heists that the hostages were about to go to the back exit. Meanwhile, the hostages were already close to the back exit, but they found a laser bomb before the back exit. The vice director pushed a trolley and he was bravely about to go to the back exit. Luckily, Denver stopped him. After that, the vice director pointed a gun at Denver, but Berlin immediately pointed a gun at the vice director too, followed by other money heists who did the same to other hostages. Back at the director's room, Chulwa forced Rio to call the police. Then Chulwa asked for the police's help because the hostages were about to run away from the rooftop. After that, Chulwa shot CCTV and other equipment so the professor couldn't contact the money heists anymore. He also did some shots around the room so that he found Berlin's medicine and took it. Then the money heists in the back exit noticed that the police activated a bomb near the back exit. After that they counterattacked the police and pushed the police by pushing a shelf. While they were doing it, Chulwa asked the hostages to go to the rooftop. Then they chased the hostages. Denver was already close to the rooftop, but he saw Missin and he asked her to go to the rooftop. After Tokyo came and found the door to go to the rooftop was locked from the outside. Then he didn't chase the hostage anymore. After that, the hostages were about to jump from the rooftop. Chul was said for the priority to do it first, but young men did it instead. Yet the rope that he was using got stuck. Seeing that, Chul asked others to just jump directly, and some hostages were already saved by the police. Tokyo shot the lock and Berlin even shot the door. Berlin then quickly went to the rooftop, held the rope and caught and young men. After that he asked Tokyo to pull the rope. After that, they found Oslo was covered with blood. Rio tried to save her, but it was too late because he was already dead. At the main hall, young men assumed that they would be killed, but instead that they weren't fail, because the safe hostages would inform the police about the situation inside MKU building. Then the money heists came. Tokyo looked so mad and told them if this thing happened again, she couldn't guarantee the hostages' safety. After that, she informed them about the new team since it was less hostage from that moment. But they didn't obey the money heist anymore. Even when Berlin scolded them and pointed guns at Missen, they didn't care. This condition messed up everything. Then Tokyo asked Denver to help Moscow to dig the tunnel, and she asked other money heists to help Nairobi print the money. Tokyo herself would watch the hostages. But Berlin said that they should find the traitor first. He accused Rio again while pointing the gun at Rio. Denver tried to stop it, but Berlin turned out to accuse Denver after that. Then the situation became chaotic. Berlin accused one by one of the money heists, then he fainted. It turned out that the traitor was Nairobi. She called Sangman because her son was with Sangman. Sangman threatened her that if she told what he asked her to anyone or couldn't do it well, she couldn't see her son anymore. This condition made her feel guilty, but she couldn't say anything. The money heists also didn't have any plan to contact the professor. Even Tokyo lost her trust to the professor because she had no idea what he could do outside the building if he couldn't be contacted. Meanwhile, the professor went to a place. He told a girl that the hostages staged a rebellion and he couldn't contact the money heist anymore. At the same time, the police joint team collected information about the money heists from the escaped hostages. Even they got information which other money heists didn't know, that is Berlin's medicine. Back at the MKU building, Tokyo asked Denver and Rio whether Berlin had a disease. Suddenly Rio remembered that Berlin happened to tell him that Berlin got a serious illness and asked him to bring the medicine for Berlin, but he didn't believe Berlin at that time. Then they immediately went to the director's room to find it, and it turned out the medicine is for the Huntington sufferer. Rio then explained about the disease which made Berlin's brain cells were dying, and the disease usually grows from the age of 30, which is when he was in jail. Then there was a past jail scene of Berlin, where he was tortured by an electric shocker while being asked which prisoners who tried to run away with him. Then the major of the prison camp found out that he got Huntington, so he stepped on the medicine and left. At the police tent, the police already found out about Berlin's illness too. Wu Jin assumed that the money heist act was not because of the money, but to sabotage the inter-Korean summit. After that, the major prison camp when Berlin was in jail, named John Youngso, turned out to be representative of North Korea for the summit. After that, Wu Jin asked an officer to investigate Huntington's medicine distribution. She thought that the police needed to track the money heist's movement outside the building too to know their real intention. Meanwhile, Youngso has already arrived in South Korea. He asked Sangman about the MKU building situation, but Sangman told him that the money heists couldn't take the money out from the building. In short, Sangman thought that the money heists just helped them to get reunification money sooner. Back at the MKU building, Rio was about to meet Berlin, but Tokyo stopped him, and it was Tokyo who talked with him instead. Tokyo then asked Berlin why he had his disease and asked his intention to join the professor's plan. He then explained about the disease that he realized in the prison camp back then. He also said that his intention to join the money heist wasn't important, and the important thing is he was willing to sacrifice his life for this plan. Tokyo also told him that she lost trust in the professor since he couldn't be contacted, and the money heists had to make their own plan without the professor. Hearing that, he silently took a cutter to threaten her. He told Rio that Tokyo was the traitor. Rio couldn't believe it and pointed a gun at Berlin. Then Helsinki came and Berlin told Helsinki that Tokyo was the traitor who killed Oslo. Oslo was on Berlin's side and pointed his gun to Rio. Then in Wu Jin's room, Wu Jin's mother tried to tell Wu Jin about the professor. But Wu Jin told her mother that no need to talk about him because they already broke up. After that, Donchul informed Wu Jin about the medicine which was bought in big amounts in Kanwon-do. It was a mountain area with only a resort. Then Wu Jin assumed that it could be the professor's hideout, and she immediately went there. Then a girl that the professor met earlier called her. She spied Wu Jin and informed the professor about it. She also told him that she put a tracking device on Wu Jin's car. Back at the MKU building, Berlin tied up Tokyo and Rio separately near the open gate. Then he asked Oslo to gather other money heists. At the same time, the professor was heading to the resort. From another resort, he saw the police who were about to go to the resort where the money heists did a training class back then. When they got here, they found lots of writing about liberating the Korean peninsula. Back again at the MKU building, other money heists are surprised when seeing Rio and Tokyo's condition. Berlin told them that between Rio and Tokyo must be the traitor. Rio said he was the traitor because he didn't want Tokyo expelled. Then Berlin opened the gate and pushed Rio's trolley outside. Denver and Moscow tried to stop Berlin and told Rio did it to save Tokyo. Hearing that, Berlin pushed Tokyo's trolley instead. She then was surrounded by the police. After that, Berlin forced N to inform the public that Berlin wanted Yeon-soo to meet him. Berlin added that he wanted to meet him before Berlin died, if not, she would kill Anne. After that, there was a past scene about the party earlier. The professor and Berlin sang and drank together, and it turned out that they are long-lost brothers. Meanwhile, Tokyo was chained in the police tent. Then there was a past scene about the professor who met a Korean guy in Moscow. He told the guy that he wanted to buy a gun from his organization, but he wanted to meet his boss named Song Juno directly. It turned out that the professor was hit by the professor's men and he was taken to another place. He was tortured because they thought that the professor was a police officer. Then a girl earlier named Seoul asked him how does the professor know Song Juno. The professor finally told him that the boss is his brother. It turned out Song Juno, who is Berlin's real name, was in the same room. He pointed the gun at him and asked. The professor noticed that he was his brother. So when Berlin and her mother wanted to turncoat to South Korea, the professor and his father were already successful in doing it. But her mother was caught by the police and killed, while Berlin was placed in jail. After that they talked, the professor told him that their father had passed away. He robbed a bank to make Berlin out of jail and took Berlin to South Korea, then he was shot by the police. After that, the professor showed Berlin some papers about the plan which couldn't be finished by their father and he asked Joanne to do the plan. Back at the MKU's open gate, Berlin threatened that he would kill and if Yeon-soo didn't come at 8 p.m. Meanwhile, the professor activated a bomb in the resort while the police already found out about the Korea reunification. Realizing that, the police were quickly out of the place. After that, Seoul informed the professor that Berlin did a crazy thing. She assumed that was because of his illness. But the professor said that he was alright and he knew the reason why Berlin did it. At the police tent, the police noticed that the money heists did it to ruin the summit. But Woo Jin also noticed something unusual happened. The money heist did something flashy after they lost contact from the professor. After that, Woo Jin did interrogation to Tokyo. She promised Tokyo to cut the prison time more than half of it if Tokyo could cooperate well with the police. Then Woo Jin asked Tokyo whether there was internal conflict between the money heists. Tokyo said because Berlin went crazy because of his disease and accused her of being a traitor. After that, Woo Jin asked officers to bring her lie detector. She asked the same question earlier. At first Tokyo answered again, but then she got mad because she didn't need to answer the same thing and she felt she was treated inhumanely. Then she went berserk and threatened to kill her if she met Woo Jin again. Because of it, Chon-soo decided to take her to the jail directly and he planned to do the interrogation later in the jail when her condition was much better. Then there was a past scene when Berlin was about to push Tokyo's trolley outside. Nairobi stopped Berlin and admitted that she was the traitor. Hearing that, Helsinki got mad at her and asked her reason to do it. Nairobi then admitted that she got a son who she sent to an orphanage before she went to jail. She then explained she did it because Sangman took his son and he would harm his son if she didn't obey his request. So it turned out Berlin and Tokyo just posed as if Berlin accused Tokyo as the traitor. Then the two of them revealed their plan. They would make Tokyo out of the building to contact the professor and save Nairobi's child. Berlin assumed that the professor would understand the money heist's plan. At the printing money room, Nairobi looked sad. Helsinki asked Nairobi how to use the printing money machine because he wanted to help Nairobi. Then Nairobi cried. After that Helsinki told her that Oslo wouldn't blame her because of what she did and Helsinki wouldn't blame her too. In the police's car, Seoul along with her men stopped the police. They put some fake bombs in the car and saved Tokyo. Then the police officers at the police tent got information about it. Woo Jin noticed that the money heists outside the building who attacked it. There were still 2 police in the car, but finally they gave up. Back at the police tent, Kim Sang-man suddenly came there and told the officers to leave the tent except Chon-soo. Because this case would be moved to South Korea's counterterrorism unit. Yongsu entered the tent too, knowing that made Wu Jin mad because the money heists could do unexpected things to Yongsu. Sangman asked the police to attack the money heist while Berlin met Yongsu, but Wu Jin thought it would risk the hostages. Because of it, Sangman asked Chonsu to get Wu Jin out of the tent. Outside the tent, Chonsu asked her to take a rest and go home. But Wu Jin couldn't accept it because the fact that the money heist expelled Tokyo and wanted to meet Yongsu could be part of their plan. Not so long after that, Dongchul came and informed the convoy car was attacked. At a different place, Dongchul told Wu Jin that there must be something that made the traitor obey Sangman's request. Meanwhile, the professor found a villa that he thought would be the place where Sangman put Nairobi's son. At the building, Young Min said to other hostages that they shouldn't have done anything in the first place. Because Berlin even asked a politician to meet him. Not so long after that, a hostage said that they were hungry. Then Helsinki and Denver came to give them potatoes since they didn't want to cook. Then Dongchul informed Wu Jin that some people who were behind Sangman when he did live broadcasts were from the money heist's family. One of them was Nairobi's son. So Sangman used the child to threaten her. Wu Jin quickly knew where Sangman took him and went there. Meanwhile at Seoul's headquarters, the professor watched Captain Mahyuk. Then the captain asked who the professor along with the money heists were and whether they would do armed revolution. After that, the professor got a text and just left the captain. Then Seoul informed the professor that she just arrived at the villa. After that she did the plan to save Nairobi's son. Tokyo and the money heists outside the building started to attack South Korea's security officers in the villa with rubber bullets. While they did it, Yongsu was already in front of the MKU building and Berlin opened the gate. Then Berlin revealed Yongsu's cruelty when he was the mayor of the prison camp. Yongsu let the prisoners hungry like dogs, tortured and killed them. Hearing that, Yongsu said Berlin already did the revenge on him. Yongsu said Berlin raped her stepdaughter who worked as medic in the camp and burned her alive. At the same time, the money heist outside the building did live online when they attacked the villa. It was quickly watched by many people. Then Tokyo saved Nairobi's son. At the same time, Wu Jin just arrived alone. And they met the money heists. After that, Wu Jin pointed the gun at them. But other money heists pointed the gun at Wu Jin too. Then Tokyo asked Nairobi's son to come to Wu Jin. After that the money heists left. Back at the MKU site, Yongsu said even though she was his stepdaughter, she was more important than his own life. Then Berlin showed the live that Seoul was doing. Seoul told the public that the government kidnapped one of the money heist's son and she was told that the government would kill him. Then they saved him and already handed him over to the police. She also said that all Yongsu said was a lie. Then she put off the mask and revealed her face. She told the public that she was the stepdaughter. She revealed that he raped her since she was a kid and made her a medic in the camp. When Yongsu killed and tortured for fun, no one could oppose him except Berlin. And when she fell in love with Berlin, Yongsu tried to kill Berlin and Seoul. After that, Berlin started a riot to save her. She added that he acted as if he was the defender of truth and the representative of the summit. The one who took him was Kim Sangman. She also revealed Sangman threatened Nairobi and asked her to kill Anne. Berlin said it was impossible if they wanted to do economic cooperation, peace reunification, or inter-Korean peaceful coexistence by killing Anne. He added that the government didn't care about it and the summit was just a trick to make the government richer. Then he said that money is just paper and people could even print as much as they wanted, but if the government decided how much money would be printed and distributed, it should be stopped. Because MKU is public property. Then there was a past scene about Nairobi who asked Anne to go to the open gate. And asked Nairobi why Berlin planned this and using her. Nairobi just said that Anne would find out soon but no matter what happened, Anne wouldn't be harmed. And immediately asked about the bomb for killing her. Then Nairobi finally revealed that Sangman threatened him and she had no other choice but obeyed him. But instead she didn't believe what the money heist said. Back at the present, and confirmed to Nairobi that it was for her son. Nairobi said she was happy that she came back. She also thanked her to keep alive. Meanwhile, Dongchul informed Wu Jin that Nairobi's son was just back to the orphanage safely. Wu Jin asked him to send some officers to watch the orphanage. Then she told him that there was nothing they could do next since they were asked to not do anything. Back at the MKU building, Rio thought that all the money heists joined the plan because of money, but Berlin looked very serious when he said to Yongsu. Berlin told Rio that it was just part of the plan. After that, Rio asked about his statement which was MKU is public property. Because people inside the building sacrificed their lives to print the money. Then Rio said that he was not interested in Berlin's big plan and Rio didn't want to be involved in it. Rio then told Berlin to not mess with the professor's plan. Afterwards, Berlin revealed his intention to join the plan was for his brother. He wanted to assure his brother's plan was successful and made it look like a revolution was the professor's plan. Rio quickly noticed that the professor is his brother. Then there was a past scene about the professor who told Berlin about it. He forecasted it exactly like what already happened. Then the professor assumed that there would be people who found out the truth and went to the road to support the money heists. Back at the present, Berlin told Rio that he asked the professor to hide the blood relation with himself or else the traitor would reveal the professor's identity to Sangman. Then Nairobi came to tell Berlin that she had already gathered the hostage. Rio asked about it, but Berlin just said to get ready because Tokyo would come back to the MKU building. At the main hall, Berlin told the hostages that he would free the hostages who wanted to be free. But he also informed that the money heists would give 3 billion won for each hostage who wanted to stay and help the money heists. Then there was a scene about 2 months before the robbery. Woo Jin was facing her divorce trial with Kim Sang-man. Suddenly the professor hit Woo Jin's car when she talked to her lawyer by phone. The professor then came to Woo Jin to say sorry, but she asked for his name card. Immediately the professor asked her to come to his new cafe. He offered coffee, but Woo Jin wanted alcohol and she said she needed a friend to drink with. They talked until they spent the night together. When Woo Jin woke up, she explained she got a husband even though in the divorce process, the professor said it was not a problem and he even wanted to travel together with her by train passing Moscow to Kiev. But she apologized that it was not romantic for her. Then she promised him to come back since she hadn't tasted the coffee yet. Back at the present, Woo Jin came to the professor's cafe but it was closed. When she was about to get in her car, she fainted. The professor quickly came and took her to the hospital. At the government's side, they discussed what they should do to the money heist. Yansu said to stop the money heists outside the building but Sangman said they could do it after the summit. Yet Yansu worried they couldn't even hold the summit and it made their politician career end. Then they watched the live video of the money heists. Berlin promised they would free some hostages the previous day. Sangman called Chonsu to disconnect the money heist's internet network but Chonsu said the police's network would be disconnected too and it was good if they freed the hostages. But Sangman immediately scolded him because it should be Sangman who decided and just disconnected it instead. After that, Sangman asked whether they could delay the summit but it was impossible and he was asked to stop the money heist before the summit. Back at the MKU building, Berlin explained that they would use the free hostage to make Tokyo come back to the MKU building and she would tell the professor's next plan to them. Meanwhile, the professor changed the plan because the news said Sangman's next presidential election was lower and it made the professor think that Sangman would do something. After that, the hostages discussed whether the money heist would give the money for real. A hostage said with 3 billion won he could change his life and the money was owned by the evil's person anyway. Then Youngmin said the evil person was the one who paid them and he wasn't interested just by 3 billion won. When the money heists came, Youngmin said to the hostages that it must be a trick and the staffs could be fired from the job because they cooperated with the money heist. Then Berlin asked Helsinki to bring the money and Berlin said that the hostages could take the money directly. Berlin also made sure the hostages that the money heists got a way to send it another way so that the police wouldn't know. He added that they also could just give it normally and the staff would be fired, but with 3 billion won, the staff could start a new life. Then there was a past scene where the professor talked about this thing. He said if a hostage chose 3 billion won it meant that the hostage wanted the money heist's plan to be successful. After that, each hostage did the consultation one by one with a money heist whether they wanted to be free or 3 billion won. Young Min, and some other hostages chose the money, while Missin said that she didn't need the money but she just wanted to be Denver's side. Missin and Denver came late. Moscow realized that they had a love affair. Denver finally admitted it. Moscow looked like he didn't support their relationship and he reminded Denver about the Stockholm Syndrome. Then Moscow already knew that Missin said that she didn't need money and she just wanted to be with Denver. Because Denver's mother also said that to Moscow, she was Moscow's hostage back then yet she left Denver after all. Then Moscow asked Denver to not do the same thing as him. Meanwhile at the printing money room, the hostage who chose to stay started to work. Nairobi asked and why she stayed since she thought and didn't need money, but instead that she just wanted to see the ending of this. At the hospital, she had recovered and called Chonsu. But Chonsu told her to take a rest and not think about the money heist. Then she came to the professor's cafe because she realized that the professor who sent her to the hospital. But the professor was preparing to move out. After that, she apologized and said she resigned from the MKU building case. She explained how the case made her mess up and she missed him. She added that even if she couldn't see him anymore, she wanted to confess about her feelings. After that she left. But the professor ran to chase her and hug her. Then they were back to the cafe and Wu Jin asked to travel together by train like their first conversation. She asked about the city that the professor mentioned. He reminded her that it was Kherson and gave her the picture of it. He told her that the reason why he wanted to go there was because his father wanted to live there. He mistakenly said that his father got dementia too. At the MKU building, Berlin asked Denver whether his father forbade his relationship with Missen. Then Denver was surprised to hear this statement, but after that he asked about Seoul, which Berlin took from the prison camp. Denver assumed that Berlin and Seoul loved each other, but Berlin told him that he regretted it. Meanwhile at Seoul's place, Captain Mohyuk noticed that Seoul got a university degree and from a rich family. He tried to influence her to have a comfortable life instead by helping the captain. But Seoul refused it and said that she got a new life already. She then left Captain Mohyuk. Then the professor came there and he was about to go with Tokyo. Before that, Seoul gave Tokyo Berlin's medicine. At the police tent, Sangman told Chonsu the reason why the money heist attracted the public by informing that they would free some hostages was because they wanted to do propaganda. Because Sangman assumed the police couldn't handle the hostages' family and the reporter, Sangman scolded Chonsu. Then he asked Chonsu to make the hostages' family and the reporters 300 m away from the building except some media who were pro-government. When the money heist found out Sangman's plan, Rio was panicked and asked Berlin to stop the money heist's plan. He even accused Berlin that the plan was Berlin's and not the professor's. Rio assumed that Berlin wanted to do the revolution. Rio was so angry that he threatened Berlin that he would kill Berlin if anything happened to Tokyo. Meanwhile, Denver talked to Missen and asked her to leave. Missen was surprised since he acted like that suddenly. Denver ended their relationship and said bad words to her on purpose. Missen then slapped her and left. Outside the building, the professor and Tokyo were ready to do the plan. The money heists inside the building just opened the gate and did a live video, but Sangman asked the officer to stop the network so the live couldn't be continued and the reporters stopped the live report too. After that, while the hostages started to leave the building, Tokyo rode a big motorbike to enter the MKU building. Seeing that, Sangman asked the police to shoot her. Luckily, Seoul controlled many drones to stop the police's bullet, and the money heist counterattacked the police too. In the middle of that, Missen came back to the building and Denver quickly chased her because it was too dangerous. Luckily they came back to the building in time and Tokyo just came back too. Denver and Missen then hugged each other. Moscow passed them and went to another place. Missen told Denver to say sorry to Moscow since Moscow was his father. But Denver refused because it was a usual thing and in days Moscow would talk to Denver again and apologize. But it turned out that Moscow was shot but he didn't tell anyone. Meanwhile, Wu Jin noticed something wrong because the professor told her that his father had dementia too. She quickly assumed that the professor must have contacted her mother. When Wu Jin was at home, she tried to find it out in her mother's note. But she couldn't find anything and she asked her mother, but her mother couldn't remember anything. But finally Wu Jin's mother remembered that she tried to call Wu Jin because she saw the professor. When Wu Jin asked about the details, she couldn't remember. When Wu Jin checked the phone, her mother tried to call Captain Mohyuk too at that time. Because of it, Wu Jin came to the police office to check what Captain Mohyuk did before he was gone. Meanwhile, Captain Mohyuk tried to escape. Not so long after that, the professor, Seoul and her men came. Seoul realized that the captain ran away and they immediately chased him. Back at the police office, Wu Jin found out that at that time Captain Mohyuk found that the professor's identity information was the cancellation of citizenship because of death. Wu Jin then found out that the professor was a North Korean immigrant and she found out about his family's background too. Meanwhile, Captain Mohyuk was hit by a car when he was about to be caught by the money heist outside the building. Back at the MKU building, Tokyo told other money heists that the summit would be held sooner. The professor's prediction was the previous day and they needed to get out of the building. Then there was a past scene about the professor who told the money heists about the printing money and digging an escape route plan. He also said that they would move the money by inflatable boat and move the money again to a truck, then they would disappear. The professor also planned to run away on the exact day as the summit. Denver told the professor that the security would be tighter, but the professor thought when the day came, people already noticed the real thieves were the government and not the money heists. Then, the area became chaotic. After that, there was a scene about the money heists who put the money in the truck. Helsinki and the professor then entered the truck and went to River Taedong. The rest of the money heists just walked through the normal road since there were people who wore the money heists uniform and mask and they joined the people. Rio smiled, but then he was confused because he saw Oslo who passed away already. Then the people were gone and Helsinki also was shot on his head. Then the truck hit a payphone. The other money heists then prepared the gun and they were shot one by one too. Then at the MKU building, Tokyo explained about the summit that would be held the previous day and they needed to get out of the MKU building because the government would attack the money heist. About the previous scene about the money heist who were shot, it turned out to be just Ryo's dream. Then Ryo told Tokyo that the professor's prediction could be wrong since he didn't predict Chula would shoot the communication device to communicate with the professor and Oslo's death. Tokyo then answered that the professor was their leader, not the prophet. Then Ryo talked about Berlin who actually was the professor's brother and Ryo didn't know their real plan since they hid their brotherhood all these times. Ryo also told Ryo that he was not interested in their big plan. Meanwhile, Denver found Moscow was dying on the toilet with a lot of blood already, so he quickly went to the main hall and called Ryo. Back at the professor, he was panicked because people noticed Muhyuk who was hit by a car and Muhyuk immediately was taken to the hospital. At the same time, Woojin already found out about the professor's identity. The police also noticed that the money heist promised 3 billion won to the hostage who stayed. After that, Berlin opened the gate while pointing a gun at Missen. He told the police that someone got shot because of the earlier incident and he asked the police to send a medic team to help the victim. But Sangman told Chonsu to just say that the money heist should take the victim to the police instead if they wanted the medic team to help the victim. Chonsu asked Sangman what if the victim was a hostage, but Sangman just told Chonsu that it was not a problem. After that, Sangman called someone and left. At Seoul's place, Seoul told the professor to just use Woojin since they were afraid that Muhyuk would reveal all he knew about them after he was awake. At first the professor didn't want to do Seoul's idea, but immediately Woojin called the professor and she asked him to accompany her because her friend was in the hospital yet her car broke down. At the MKU building, Ryo started to do the surgery to Moscow. After that, Denver complained that he couldn't even contact the professor. Then Berlin told Denver that he knew that it would be difficult for Denver, but all money heists should try to run away before the summit. Hearing that, Ryo said that the professor's plan had gone awry. Then Ryo told all money heists the sibling relationship between Berlin and the professor. He also informed them that the professor was a North Korean defector who pretended to be a South Korean and Ryo had a trust issue to the professor. Afterwards, Ryo influenced all the money heists and he told Denver to just take Moscow out of the MKU building to save him since it was better to enter the jail than die in the building. After that, Ryo left and the situation became chaotic. Helsinki was angry at Berlin and Denver asked Moscow to just surrender to the police but Moscow didn't want to. Then Moscow told all money heists to stop arguing and just dig instead. Actually not only Ryo, Berlin and Tokyo were also afraid in case the professor's forecast was wrong. Back at Sangman, it was confirmed that the summit would be held a day sooner which was the previous day and the government planned to surround the money heists and attack them. Yet, the money heist couldn't know about the news since the police turned off the network. Meanwhile, the professor picked up Woojin and took her to the hospital where Muhyuk stayed. Woojin ended up asking the professor to see Muhyuk too. Woojin told the professor that she assumed Muhyuk tried to run away from someone so that he got hit by a car and she thought it was the money heist. After that, Woojin got out of the room and informed Donchul to get ready. Eventually, before the professor picked up Woojin, the professor told Seoul to continue the plan if the professor didn't return. Because it would be a real problem if Muhyuk was awake and told Woojin. Moreover, there were many police who guarded Muhyuk. Back at the hospital, Woojin lied to the professor that the doctor said that the possibility of Muhyuk to awake still some days to go and he might be unable to communicate. Meanwhile, Woojin pretended to hug the professor, while her purpose was to put a tapper device on the professor's jacket. At the hospital parking, Woojin refused to enter the professor's car because she told him that Chonsu would come soon. But actually, Woojin just wanted to find out where the professor was about to go so that she could stop all money heists. In the car, the professor called Seoul and informed Seoul that Muhyuk was not awake yet. At the same time, Donchul and Woojin followed the professor. The professor went to the summit meeting hall. The police quickly wanted to surround the professor, but the professor was not in his car. Then the police entered the building to find the professor, but they only found the professor's jacket. It turned out Seoul informed that Woojin's car followed the professor. Seoul knew it since she put GPS on Woojin's car. The professor checked it and found the device. After that, Woojin informed Chonsu and Chonsu scolded her since the professor could run away and she didn't tell Chonsu first. Moreover, she was no longer on the joint team and the professor was Woojin's boyfriend. Chonsu then said Woojin was on suspension for a while. Back at MKU, Ryo tried to dig the escape route too. Denver asked about his opinion whether the professor would make all the money heists killed. Rio said that he didn't know but just didn't trust the professor too much. Afterwards, Rio told him to take his father first and help him after the escape route was done. But Denver just wanted Rio who got out first since he had a family out there. At the same time, the money heist outside the building worked hard to dig the escape route too. Not so long after that, the money heist outside the building could hear the money heist inside the building. Knowing that, Rio and Denver were so happy, and Rio informed them that Moscow needed to be cured soon and they would do that after the escape route was done. Then Rio and Denver continued to dig excitedly. But Missin came and informed Denver about Moscow. Missin couldn't say anything, but Denver was just heading to Moscow's place. Moscow was dying and talked to Tokyo. He imagined Tokyo was Denver's mother. He apologized to her for everything. He also said that he had tried hard to make Denver be unlike him. Tokyo then said Denver grew well and he was reliable because of Moscow. Then Denver came. He told Moscow that he already dug everything for the route. Then Moscow, who was about to die, said that he loved Denver and he told Denver to not hurt Missin. Moscow also said thank you to the money heist, and the money heist was a family for him. He died after he told them his real name. At the main hall, Rio told Tokyo that it was his first time he saw someone who was dying. Then Tokyo told Rio when she met the professor, it was the time when she saw her friend was shot dead because she robbed a loan shark with Tokyo. Tokyo told Rio how she knew her and she told that her friend was from South Korea. Then there was a past scene about the professor who told Tokyo that the professor lived as a South Korean after his father's death. After that, the professor told her about the government who offered him funds to make North Korea and South Korea united. He was asked to develop the plan, but the government just used the professor's work to make a lot of money. The professor felt bad about Tokyo's friend who was dead because he felt that it was his mistake too. Back at the present, the money heist prepared to get ready while the professor checked the condition of the crowd, and he found some crowds who support the money heist. At the same time, Chonsu informed Sangman that the professor was Song Sunho. Then Sangman asked Chonsu to attack the money heist after the summit ended. He also told Chonsu that the government's aim was not to catch them, but to kill everyone who were involved in it. Then the professor informed Seoul about the condition, but it turned out Wu Jin found Seoul's place and Wu Jin pointed a gun at the professor. Then the professor explained the reason why he did that. The unification or economic cooperation was bullshit and the government just took advantage of it to steal a lot of money. He also talked about Sangman, who was her ex-husband. Then the professor was successful in taking over Wu Jin's gun when he talked about his feelings to her. After that, he shot her. After that, there was a past scene about the professor's father who prepared things because he wanted to go somewhere. Then the little professor came and asked his father. His father said that he would not go home for a day because he needed more money to release Berlin. Afterwards, the little professor talked about MKU where they print money there and why they didn't make much money so that no one was poor. But not so long after that, his father left. But it turned out his father robbed a bank and was shot dead in the bank. Then back to the present, the professor came to help the rest to dig the escape route. Finally, the escape route was done and Denver and the professor could meet up. Immediately, the professor entered the MKU building and was greeted by other money heists. Then Tokyo showed him the printed money. Meanwhile, Muhyuk just woke up and the summit agreement was just signed. The government planned to kill the money heist soon. At the same time, Wu Jin was handcuffed and she tried to release herself. Then the police were asked to attack the money heist. Inside the building, the money heists and the hostages were moving the money to the underground drains. Beside that, they needed to close the exit too to prevent the pursuit. After that, Rio and Tokyo set the chairs and tables to block the police. Then Rio asked Tokyo about her plan next and Rio just wanted to know Tokyo's dream. But not so long after that, the police attacked from above the building by helicopter. Then the police entered the building and attacked Rio and Tokyo. Rio and Tokyo counterattacked the police, but a police opened the gate and immediately more police entered the building. Then other money heists noticed and Denver asked the hostage to go to the secure place first. Back at the entrance room, Chulwu shot Tokyo from a different place. Tokyo quickly fell on the floor when Chulwu wanted to shoot Rio. Luckily the money heists came and fought Chulwu and other police. Helsinki even wanted to kill Chulwu, but Denver reminded him that they couldn't kill him. When Denver prevented Helsinki, Chulwu tried to take a gun. Luckily, Denver noticed it and he quickly prevented Chulwu from taking the gun. After that, Denver asked Helsinki to just help the rest at the entrance room. Luckily, at the entrance room Tokyo was still alive. Helsinki just arrived there and counterattacked the police. Back at the exhibition room, Denver fought Chulwu without any gun. Chulwu was about to kill him with a knife, but it turned out Missing shot Chulwu's hand. She then threatened Chulwu to not do anything or else she would do more. Then Denver noticed Chulwu wanted to take the gun again, so Denver hit Chulwu's head. At the same time, the professor noticed that the police arrived sooner and asked the hostage to come back to the building. Meanwhile, Sangman just got out of the summit hall and he saw a crowd who supported the money heist. The crowd even did a bit of anarchy. After that, he called again to inform to kill all the money heists. Back at the MKU building, the police threw lacrimatory gas. The money heists immediately stayed away from that and ran away. The police then went to the exhibition room to help Chulwu first. Chulwu told the police that the money heists must have gone to the basement. Then Chulwu along with other police were heading to the basement. After that, Chulwu found a tunnel and the police entered the tunnel. But it turned out everyone who was in the tunnel were the hostages. Meanwhile, Rio was successful in making a digital lock in the room the money heists wanted to run away. Then Tokyo, Rio, Missing and Denver came to the professor, while Denver, Nairobi and Helsinki were still in the room because they needed to activate the bomb so that the police couldn't chase them. The professor asked them to do their own task, while the professor himself would manage the truck. But at the same time, Wu Jin was successful in releasing herself. She then stopped a car to lend her a phone to call Chonsu. She informed Chonsu what she knew about the hideout. Chonsu didn't really believe her, but not so long after that Muhyuk came and he also told Chonsu about the hideout. After that, Muhyuk said he had sent the police to go to the hideout. Afterwards, Wu Jin found the tunnel and entered the tunnel. At the same time, there was a problem when Nairobi activated the bomb. Then Berlin told Helsinki and Nairobi to go first since the police tried to open the lock. In other words, Berlin would sacrifice his life. At first Nairobi refused it, but Berlin asked Helsinki to force her to just run away. Then all the hostages were released by the police and Chonsu was informed that the police had already entered the hideout. After that, a money heist outside the building called the professor to inform about it and the professor looked so panicked. Then Berlin called the professor and informed about his condition and then the professor told Berlin to not do it since the police already found out their hideout, but it seemed like Berlin planned to die in this plan. Berlin shot at the police outside but Chulwu threw a bomb instead. Hearing the bomb, quickly made the professor cry. Seoul, who already knew about the condition, quickly ran to save Berlin. She arrived in time and saved Berlin. He was surprised to know there was Seoul. Seoul said Berlin couldn't be dead without her permission. But Berlin told her to go but she wanted to stay to die with him. Then some police entered the tunnel but Seoul pointed a gun at the police. The police also noticed there was a bomb and came back to the building. After that, Seoul shot the bomb. Hearing the second bomb made the professor hopeless. He called Sangman and asked him to not kill other money heists. Tokyo, who was looking for the professor and found him, quickly threw the professor's cell phone. After that, it turned out Tokyo and the professor found another escape. Then Chulwu informed Chonsu that Berlin blew himself up and blocked the tunnel. It made the police need to chase them from another route. Meanwhile, Wu Jin heard the bomb and tried to find out where the sound was. Then she saw some police but it turned out the police caught her by Sangman's request. Sangman said that Wu Jin was suspected of helping the money heists. Wu Jin quickly was sent to the police tent. She was angry at Sangman because she was suspected. But Wu Jin said that he wanted to kill the money heists because he didn't want the public to find out what Sangman and Yeonsu planned from the summit. After that, Chonsu was informed that there were some bombs near the main square's underground. Hearing that, Sangman thought that the money heist wanted to run away when there were bomb victims in the square. Chonsu told Sangman that the police needed to evacuate the crowd. But Sangman refused it because the money heists could mingle with the crowd and ran away. Muhyuk then told Sangman that the police could defuse the bomb. But Sangman refused it too since the money heists could die from their own bomb. Hearing that, made Muhyuk mad because he thought Sangman didn't care about the police's lives. Then Muhyuk just left the tent and chased Wu Jin who was heading to the police office. He told Wu Jin that he thought Wu Jin's statement earlier was right. Wu Jin told Muhyuk it was impossible if they really used the bomb. Meanwhile, the police already blocked crowds and locals in the main square. Chonsu bravely didn't obey Sangman's request and asked the officer to evacuate people around there. The bomb was about to explode soon but it turned out to be some pig air balloon filled with money that appeared. The crowds quickly took the money from the air balloon. The news even said that the money heists were successful in running away and the police seemed to surrender to control the situation. Meanwhile the money heist ran away from different place. Wu Jin already noticed where it was since the professor told her about a tunnel that was not blocked. Wu Jin assumed that they would go to the station around there. Then Muyuk attacked the police who guarded Wu Jin to make Wu Jin go to the station. The money heists were in the station already, then one of them got a call from Berlin who was eventually still alive. He and Seoul ran away to the main square and wore the mask. The money heists were so happy to hear that. Then Tokyo assumed that the professor was thinking about Wu Jin and she said Wu Jin might be heading to the station, and Tokyo noticed the professor's feeling too. Then Tokyo got on the train along with the rest who already did earlier. But Wu Jin came. Denver pointed a gun at Wu Jin, but Tokyo forbade it. Then Wu Jin threatened that she would arrest the money heist and asked him to stop the train. The professor was successful in making Wu Jin think that the professor was not wrong by doing this. But he let Wu Jin do it if she wanted to punish him because he lied to her. After that, the professor got on the train. Then the money heist just arrived and they wore different clothes and acted as if they didn't know each other. Meanwhile, the news about the money heists quickly spread worldwide. The crowds and the news seemed to support what the money heists did. The reporters tried to interview Sangman and Yosu about it. A year later, Wu Jin was interrogated by a police officer because she was suspected to get money from the money heist. She said she didn't get anything, but the police seemed unable to believe her. Then there was a foreign law firm that wanted to help her. It was said that a secret client hired them for Wu Jin. Then at her home, Wu Jin looked for a postcard that the professor gave her. After that, she went to Kherson. She asked a local about a cafe, but unfortunately he couldn't speak English. Then suddenly the professor came and offered her coffee around the place. She smiled and just kind of repeated the conversation like when the first time they met.